Chapter 160. Outside Qi City, Chu Xiu looked back at the Jiang family and said calmly, "No wonder the Jiang family could rise in Jianghu. This Jiang Shichen is quite a character." Du Guangzhong nodded and said, "That's right. The Jiang family dared to make a move against Fang Jingyuan in the past. They are indeed audacious." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "That's not what I meant. I'm referring to his attitude today. I've already gone too far just now, and my strength is still there, but this Jiang Shichen was still able to hold himself back from falling out with me. If it were you, would you be able to do the same?" Du Guangzhong thought about it and shook his head. No. Putting himself in Jiang Shichen's shoes, Chu Xiu's behavior just now was basically looking for trouble. If he were the head of the family, it would be strange if he agreed. Even other small families would not let Chu Xiu bully them like this, let alone someone as powerful as Jiang Shichen, who dared to plot against and kill an inspector. Just because you're an inspector, you can just ask for 1/10 of my family's wealth. Are you the Guangzhong torture room or the 36 northern bandits? Then what should we do in 3 days, sir? Chu Xiu said calmly, "Nothing. I've said it before. I hope the Jiang family will make a rational choice in 3 days. The choice is not mine, but theirs." After saying that, Chu Xiu turned around and left with his people. Meanwhile, in the Jiang family, Jiang Yao said with dissatisfaction, "Master, Chu Xiu is so arrogant. Why are you still tolerating it? 1/10 of the family's wealth? How dare he ask for this? He doesn't know what he's talking about." Jiang Shichen said coldly, "Of course I know that Chu Xiu is deliberately extorting the Jiang family. However, the reason why the Jiang family has been able to come this far is because of our cautiousness and decisiveness. When it's time to make a move, you have to be decisive, but you can't act rashly. Think about it, the Guangzhong torture room's inspectors are almost all experts in the three-flower realm. But now, a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm suddenly appeared. How could he have gotten to this position without any background? The previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, is rigid and inflexible. He has long been disliked by Lord Wei, and he doesn't have any backing. That's why we dare to make a move. But as for Chu Xiu, let's first investigate his background and see if he has the right to take 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets." After that, Jiang Shichen said to Jiang Yao, "Let's go to the Shang prefecture with me. We need to ask Lord Wei Han about Chu Xiu's background." This time, the Jiang family only took out such a small amount to send off Chu Xiu. It wasn't that they looked down on Chu Xiu, but they had already spent a lot of money on an inspector. However, it wasn't Chu Xiu, but Wei Han, the inspector of the Shang prefecture. After Fang Jingyuan's death, Wei Han was the most active. He wanted to take the opportunity to take over the Jianghu prefecture. The Jiang family was prepared to invest in advance, so they gave Wei Han a big gift. However, who would have thought that Wei Han didn't take over the Jianghu prefecture in the end? Instead, the higher-ups sent a new inspector, which made the Jiang family's gift go to waste. Of course, it wasn't exactly a free gift. At least Wei Han remembered the Jiang family's kindness. Even if Wei Han didn't take over the Jianghu prefecture in the end, he still had a certain relationship with the Jiang family. The area of the Shang prefecture was similar to that of the Jianghu prefecture, but it was much more prosperous. There were more than 20 small cities under its jurisdiction, and the Shangzhou city in the center was also more prosperous than Jianghu city. Moreover, Wei Hanshan's way of doing things was different from most of the inspectors. Most of the inspectors of the Guangzhong torture hall, even if they had residences outside, would spend most of their time living in the Hall of Inspectors. Wei Han, on the other hand, was fond of luxury and enjoyment. He had a special mansion in Shangzhou City, and even his office was in his own residence. He would only go to the Hall of Inspectors if there was a major event. At this time, Jiang Shichen brought some people to the front of Wei Hanshan's mansion. After reporting, they were brought to the guest hall. After a while, Wei Han yawned and walked out in a loose brocade robe. He said slowly, "Isn't this the Jiang family's patriarch? Why are you free to come to my place?" Previously, Wei Han was quite enthusiastic about the Jiang family. If he could successfully take over the Jianghu prefecture, he would definitely make friends with a large local clan like the Jiang family. However, now that the new inspector of the Jianghu prefecture had taken office, he gave up on this idea. His attitude towards the Jiang family was very casual, but after all, he had received benefits from them, so he still had to meet them when it was necessary. Jiang Shichen cupped his hands respectfully and said, "This humble one has come to find Lord Wei to inquire about the new inspector of the Jianghu prefecture, Chu Xiu. That official Chu has really gone too far." Hearing that it was about Chu Xiu, Wei Hanshan's interest was piqued. He asked, "What's wrong? What kind of trouble did your new inspector cause this time?" Jiang Shichen's face had a trace of grief and indignation as he said, "Chu Xiu came to my Jiang family to beg for alms. According to the rules, my Jiang family gave Chu Xiu quite a lot of money. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would demand an exorbitant price, asking for 1/10 of our Jiang family's assets?" Hearing this, Wei Hanshan was speechless. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "This Chu Xiu really dares to ask for 1/10 of the family's assets. Is he so poor that he's crazy?" The position of the inspector was the lowest level in the Guanzhong torture room. It was an existence that controlled the power of a region. In a prefecture, there were more than 10 small cities and dozens of big and small powers. If there was a place that needed help from the Guanzhong torture room, it was normal for them to take out some gifts. However, Chu Xiu directly asked for 1/10 of the other party's assets. This was no different from robbery. Even Wei Hanshan didn't dare to do this, so where did this Chu Xiu get his confidence from? Therefore, Wei Hanshan asked in surprise, "This Chu Xiu has gone too far, but you still haven't fallen out with him?" Jiang Shichen said, "I also want to fall out with him, but Chu Xiu looks so aggressive. I don't know who his backer is. If he has some connections in the main hall, wouldn't it be easy for him to take advantage of a small family like my Jiang family? Therefore, I asked Lord Wei for help. I want to find out more about this Chu Xiu." Wei Hanshan looked at Jiang Shichen with a faint smile. "Patriarch Jiang is quite careful." Jiang Shichen smiled apologetically and said, "People in the pugilistic world die if they aren't careful. My Jiang family still has a lot of clansmen behind them, so I can't be careless." Wei Hanshan waved his hand and said, "All right, since Patriarch Jiang has said so, I will help you this time. Chu Xiu's background is really not simple. He also has a backer." Hearing Wei Hanshan's words, Jiang Shichen immediately thought that it was a close shave. The waters of the Guanzhong torture room were deep. The 4 disciplinary officers were only forces on the surface. The truly powerful cultivators were all in the main hall. For example, the leaders of the disciplinary bureau were said to be stronger than the 4 disciplinary officers. But then Wei Hanshan said, "But you don't have to worry. Chu Xiu can't threaten you. This Chu Xiu may be young, but he is quite famous among the younger generation. He is someone who has been on the Longhu list. He used to be a wandering cultivator, but later joined the Blue Dragon Society. He was an assassin in the Blue Dragon Society for a period of time, and it was said that he caused a stir in the east of Yen. Later, for some unknown reason, he suddenly betrayed the Blue Dragon Society and joined the Guanzhong torture room, becoming the Jianghu patrol. And his backer, the key to him becoming the patrol, is the Guanzhong hero, Chu Yuanxing. This person was personally recommended by Chu Yuanxing to Lady Guanxiu. It is said that he is a distant relative of Great Hero Chu. Since Great Hero Chu has spoken, Lady Guanxiu naturally has to give him face. Otherwise, do you think that a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm like him could become the patrol so easily? Wei Hanshan looked at Jiang Shichen and said calmly, "Although Chu Xiu is an outstanding talent on the Longhu list, his reputation is in the east of Yen. No matter how outstanding he is still only a member of the younger generation. There is no need to worry about him. As for Great Hero Chu's recommendation, you don't have to worry about it. Great Hero Chu has recommended many people over the years. Have you seen him interfere? Moreover, even if Great Hero Chu wants to interfere, he can't. This is an internal matter of the Guanzhong torture room. Great Hero Chu knows his limits." Hearing this, Jiang Shichen immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands at Wei Hanshan and said, "Thank you, Lord Wei, for the information. Wei Hanshan's information was very important to Jiang Shichen. Without absolute confidence, how would he dare to fall out with Chu Xiu? In the past, the Jiang family dared to attack Fang Jingyuan because Fang Jingyuan had no backing. In fact, Wei Juduan didn't even like him. Moreover, the Jiang family still owed Wei Juduan a favor. Although Chu Xiu was weaker than Fang Jingyuan and had a backer, it was clear that this backer was useless. The great hero of Guanzhong did have a great reputation in Guanzhong, but it was only reputation, not power. Just like what Wei Hanshan said, Chu Yuanxing wouldn't easily interfere with the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. If he had to interfere with every person he recommended, then who would have the final say in the Guanzhong torture room? Jiang Shichen smiled and handed over a brocade box. Inside were 500 taels of purple gold and 2 sixth revolution pills. Although there were only 2 pills, they were more valuable than the 2 bottles of pills that Chu Xiu had. The items in this brocade box were also more than double the amount that he had prepared for Chu Xiu. What do you mean by this, Lord Jiang? Wei Hanshan kept the brocade box without changing his expression and asked. Jiang Shichen smiled and said, "It's just a small gift. I hope Lord Wei won't mind. My Jiang family is preparing to expand our business to the Shangzhou province. I hope Lord Wei will take care of us when the time comes. Also, if Chu Xiu still wants to make things difficult for my Jiang family, I hope Lord Wei will put in a few words of justice for my Jiang family." Although the Jiang family had left some impression in Wei Juduan's mind, they still had to make friends with the low-level patrol envoys. Originally, Chu Xiu was a very good choice. However, this Chu Xiu was too greedy. Therefore, they had no choice but to make friends with Wei Hanshan. At most, they would move a part of their business to the Shangzhou province. Chapter 161. 3 days later, Chu Xiu summoned Du Guangzhong and the other 2. He asked them to bring all the Jianghu constables and constables under the inspector hall and gather them outside Qi City. Du Guangzhong and the other 2 were shocked and asked, "Sir, are you going to?" Chu Xiu said lightly, 3 days are up. I've given the Jiang family time. When the time comes, we'll see what the Jiang family will choose. If the Jiang family makes the wrong choice, then I'm sorry. Du Guangzhong and the other 2 felt a chill. Looking at Chu Xiu's behavior, they knew what Chu Xiu meant when he said sorry. However, the 3 of them didn't dare to dissuade Chu Xiu's decision. They could only follow his orders. There was only one advantage to establishing authority through threats. It was that in a short period of time, his subordinates wouldn't dare to say a word of nonsense or disobey him. The bodies of Wu Siping and the others had just been buried. They didn't want to follow in Wu Siping's footsteps. When they arrived at the Jiang family in Qi City again, Chu Xiu led his men into the Jiang family's mansion. However, this time, there wasn't even anyone to greet them. Jiang Shichen and the others didn't even get up when they saw Chu Xiu enter. Chu Xiu didn't mind. He just said indifferently, "Clan leader Jiang, I wonder if you've made up your mind after 3 days?" Jiang Shichen said blandly, "I'm sorry, I can't comply with your Excellency Chu's request. It's true that the Guanzhong torture hall protects the safety of the Guanzhong area, but it doesn't mean that the martial arts forces of the Guanzhong area have to bow down to the Guanzhong torture hall and let it plunder." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Master Jiang, is this the result after 3 days of consideration? I didn't ask for 1/10 of the family's assets for nothing. The things that you've done in Jianghu Prefecture can't be hidden from others. I'm actually very easy to talk to. As long as I take the things, I'll protect all the businesses of the Jiang family in Jianghu Prefecture. You don't have to be as sneaky as before." Jiang Shichen shouted coldly, "Chu Xiu, even if you're the patrol of the Guanzhong torture room, you can't slander me. Since when did the Jiang family do anything sneaky? Moreover, the Guanzhong torture room has always relied on evidence to speak. Do you have any evidence for what you're saying?" Jiang Shichen was very confident in facing Chu Xiu. Chu Yuanxing, Chu Xiu's backer, would not interfere with the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room, and the Jiangs had also hidden and destroyed all the smuggling evidence. They were more innocent than anyone else. Even if they let Chu Xiu investigate now, Chu Xiu would not be able to find anything. However, because of Chu Yuanxing, the Jiangs could not do anything to Chu Xiu. No one cared about Fang Jingyuan's death, but someone would definitely care about Chu Xiu's death. 2 patrols had died in such a short time, and one of them was introduced by the hero of Guanzhong, Chu Yuanxing. It would be strange if the higher-ups did not send someone to investigate. However, not killing Chu Xiu did not mean that they would let Chu Xiu be arrogant here. After today, Jiang Shichen was prepared to unite all the martial arts forces in Jianzhou Prefecture to boycott Chu Xiu and ruin his reputation as a patrol. The Guanzhong torture room's review of patrols also depended on their achievements. You, a patrol, have already lost your reputation in your territory. One could imagine how the Guanzhong torture room would think of you. A light punishment would be a reprimand, a heavy punishment. You might even be stripped of your position as a patrol. Looking at Jiang Shichen's respectful attitude, Chu Xiu shook his head and sighed. Master Jiang, I told you 3 days ago that I hoped you would make a rational choice. Unfortunately, you still made the wrong choice in the end. Don't you want evidence? Fine, I'll give you evidence today. As he spoke, Chu Xiu took out a pile of ores from the space secret box and threw them on the ground. He said coldly, "These are precious ores from northern Yen. They are refined into gold and are prohibited from being smuggled to other countries. Qi City's Jiang family has defied the torture room's rules, smuggled prohibited items, and tarnished the reputation of Guanzhong. They deserve death." Everyone from the Jiang family was stunned, including Du Guangzhong. They didn't expect that Chu Xiu was blatantly framing them. The hot-tempered Jiang Yao stood out and pointed at Chu Xiu, shouting, "Chu Xiu! Are you treating the Jiang family as idiots or the Guanzhong torture room as idiots? Just you wait, this isn't over yet. The Jiang family is old friends with Lord Wei Judwan. After today, the Jiang family will definitely complain about you to Lord Wei Judwan. Letting someone like you be the patrol of the Guanzhong torture room is simply reckless." A disdainful sneer was suddenly heard. However, before anyone could react, Chu Xiu's hand was already on his red sleeve blade when the sneer was heard. The blade ray condensed from the blood-refined spirit gang was unsheathed. A green dragon emerged from the sea, and the momentum of the blade soared into the sky. In an instant, the magnificent scarlet blade light filled the entire hall. Its speed was extremely fast, and its power was also extremely strong. No one present, including Du Guangzhong and Chu Xiu's subordinates, expected Chu Xiu to suddenly make a move. However, the blade of Chu Xiu's azure dragon in the sleeve was extremely fast. It was so fast that before Jiang Yao could react, the blade light was already in front of him. Defend! Jiang Yao didn't even have time to draw his sword. He directly struck out with both palms. Green-colored Gang Qi suddenly exploded and condensed into a Gang Qi shield. He wanted to temporarily block Chu Xiu's blade. However, the power of the blood-refined God shield was beyond his imagination. His Gang Qi shield couldn't even block for a moment in front of Chu Xiu's blade. It was directly smashed by Chu Xiu's blade. With a loud explosion of Gang Qi, Jiang Yao was directly sent flying by Chu Xiu's blade. The huge blade wound on his chest was bleeding, and it was unknown whether he was still alive or not. Chu Xiu held the red sleeve blade and said coldly, "I didn't treat anyone as an idiot. However, sometimes the process isn't important. What matters is the result. Today, I destroyed your Jiang family. If I say that your Jiang family is smuggling contraband, then you are smuggling contraband. If I say that you colluded with evil spirits, then you colluded with evil spirits. It doesn't matter whether you did it or not. What's important is that you did it when I said you did it." Jiang Shichen's eyes were filled with anger, but more than that, there was regret and fear. Previously, he had always treated Chu Xiu with the same attitude as a normal patrol inspector. It wasn't until now that he realized that Chu Xiu was different from those people. Fang Jingyuan still had to act according to the rules when he found trouble with the Jiang family. He would only take action when he had enough evidence after investigating. In Chu Xiu's opinion, his way of doing things was simply lawless. There were no rules at all. Chu Xiu turned around and said to Du Guangzhong and the others who were still stunned, "What are you still doing there? We can't let any of these sinners of the Jiang family go." Du Guangzhong and the other two gritted their teeth. In any case, the three of them had already boarded Chu Xiu's pirate ship. All of their weaknesses were in Chu Xiu's hands. No matter how excessive Chu Xiu's actions were, they would still follow suit. Therefore, the three of them had no choice but to take out signal arrows and release them out of the meeting hall. The martial artists from the patrol hall who were lying in ambush outside the city immediately entered the city, instantly attracting the attention of most of the martial artists in Qi City. It was important to know that apart from some major missions in the Guangzhong torture room, it was rare for so many martial artists to gather together. At this moment, they thought that some infamous demon had come to Qi City. Jiang Shichen gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, fine, fine. Chu Xiu, it seems like you've been preparing to take action against the Jiang family for a long time. Very well, the Jiang family will accompany you to the end." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Shichen prepared to gather all the martial artists of the Jiang family to resist Chu Xiu. They could not just sit and wait for death. However, at this moment, an old voice suddenly sounded, "Wait." Outside the meeting hall, an old man in a green robe walked in. His hair and beard were all white, and his face was full of wrinkles. His aura was very vague, but it revealed a smell of decay. "Elder ancestor, why are you out?" Jiang Shichen and the others hurried to help the elder ancestor up but were blocked by the elder ancestor. "There's no need. I'm not so old that I need someone to help me up." The elder ancestor looked deeply into Chu Xiu's eyes and said, "Official Chu is young and promising, and his methods are shocking. This time, the Jiang family has made an error in judgment. The Jiang family is willing to hand over 1/10 of our family's assets to official Chu. From now on, the Jiang family is willing to follow official Chu's lead." "Elder ancestor," Jiang Shichen hurriedly shouted. The other Jiang family members also looked at the elder ancestor with puzzled and doubtful eyes. They all thought that the elder ancestor had come out because he saw the family was in danger, so he had come out to fight one last time. However, they never expected that the first thing the elder ancestor would do was admit defeat to Chu Xiu. The elder ancestor glanced at Jiang Shichen and sighed, "Fool. In the past, you were the calmest among the younger generation of the Jiang family, so I appointed you to lead the Jiang family. However, I didn't expect you to be so foolish this time. Don't forget where this is. This is Guangzhong. The Guangzhong that belongs to the Guangzhong torture room. If official Chu wants to deal with the Jiang family, even if this reason is a little more ridiculous, the Jiang family will still be at a disadvantage if it is reported to the higher-ups. This is because the Guangzhong torture room will not go wrong." Chu Xiu looked at the Jiang clan's patriarch with a faint smile. Although this old man was old, he wasn't muddle-headed. He could see very clearly. However, Jiang Shichen still argued, "Lord Guanxiu is impartial and impartial. If things get out of hand, Lord Guanxiu will not stand by and do nothing." The elder ancestor shook his head and sighed. "You still don't understand. No matter how impartial he is, Lord Guan still cares about the benefits of the Guangzhong torture room. If the Jiang family tells the outside world that the inspector of the Guangzhong torture room took things by force and is comparable to bandits, this is the truth. However, it will ultimately damage the image of the entire Guangzhong torture room. This is something that the Guangzhong torture room will never allow. Therefore, if things get out of hand, although official Chu will be punished for breaking the rules, the Jiang family will also be accused of these unreliable crimes and killed. In Guangzhong, the Guangzhong torture room will not make mistakes. The ones who are wrong are us. Once things get out of hand, both sides will suffer." Chapter 162. Compared to Jiang Shichen, the patriarch of the Jiang family had stayed in Guangzhong for more than 100 years. He had witnessed the process of Guangzhong torture room growing from weak to strong and gradually rising. He naturally knew more about Guangzhong torture room than Jiang Shichen. Guangzhong torture room would not allow others to affect their image. Once things got out of hand, even if Chu Xiu threw out this so-called evidence in front of everyone, Guangzhong torture room would make this an ironclad case. So if things got out of hand, it would be a situation where both sides would suffer. The Jiang family had established themselves in Guangzhou for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen such an unruly inspector. However, even if Chu Xiu did not follow the rules, his status in Guangzhou torture room was not something the Jiang family could compare to. Also, he was not like Fang Jingyuan who had no backing. They could deal with him in secret. Now that Chu Xiu had put on such a show, the patriarch of the Jiang family could not think of any other way other than to admit defeat and seek revenge in the future. Chu Xiu looked at the Jiang clan's patriarch and sighed. He shook his head and said, "Your Jiang clan does have someone who understands. Unfortunately, I gave your Jiang clan a chance, but you didn't cherish it." The patriarch of the Jiang family's expression changed slightly. "Official Chu, what do you mean? Could it be that you want both sides to suffer heavy losses? You have gone too far. If this goes to the higher-ups, you will lose your position as inspector. The Jiang family has no deep grudge with you. Is this worth it?" Chu Xiu said coolly, "Why do we have to go to the higher-ups? If we destroy the entire Jiang family, would anyone still go and make a fuss? I have said that I gave you a chance, but you did not cherish it. Old Master Jiang, you have been in the Jianghu for a long time. You should know that when it comes to doing something, either you do it or you do it to the extreme. Today, your Jiang family was forced to lower their heads and hand over 1/10 of their assets. You must be very dissatisfied, right? Who knows how you will plot against me in the future? In order to avoid future troubles, I ask that all of you die." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu shouted, "Kill!" As soon as the word "kill" was uttered, Du Guangzhong and the others immediately charged forward. While they were talking, the other Jianghu constables from the patrol hall had also arrived at the Jiang clan and charged forward. The great ancestor of the Jiang family widened his eyes when he saw this. He pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Madman! Are you so confident that you can destroy the Jiang family? Don't you know the relationship between my Jiang family and Lord Wei Juduan? Have you considered the consequences of destroying my Jiang family?" Chu Xiu held the red sleeve knife in his hand as he walked step by step towards the Jiang clan patriarch. He said indifferently, "After talking for so long, your Jiang clan's confidence still comes from Lord Wei Juduan. Unfortunately, Lord Wei is not here now. Strength that is not your own will never be your own. Your Jiang clan's confidence is very weak." As soon as he finished speaking, the red sleeve knife in Chu Xiu's hand suddenly slashed forward. The crimson saber was more than 10 feet long, and a ferocious killing intent filled the air. The atmosphere in the entire meeting hall suddenly turned cold. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan's eyes suddenly shone with a sharp light. He shouted, "When the family is in danger, no one should hold back. Whether the Jiang clan can survive this crisis depends on today." The great ancestor of the Jiang clan was indeed a little timid before. He still chose to admit defeat when Chu Xiu had forced him to such an extent. But in fact, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was just thinking of the big picture. He didn't want to fight with Chu Xiu until both sides suffered losses. Now that Chu Xiu had decided to go all out, the Jiang clan also had the courage to fight to the death. Although the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was old and his qi and blood were declining, he was not someone who could be killed by a junior in the physical invulnerability realm. Facing Chu Xiu's saber, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan formed a fist print with one hand and slammed it down. His seemingly declining body actually bloomed with a dazzling sharpness. White gang qi suddenly erupted, and the fist print fell like thousands of flowers blooming, one layer on top of the other. Bursts of gang qi explosions rang out, directly blasting Chu Xiu away. The realm of 3 flowers at one's prominence was to condense one's essence, qi, and spirit to their peak state, converging them into one. It was like stepping into another world. As long as one could step into the realm of 3 flowers at one's prominence at a young age, they could even slow down their own aging. Among the 5 levels of qi-controlling realm, the inner and physical invulnerability realms were different worlds. The 3 flowers and 5 qis were another world, and the final realm of oneness of heaven and man was the peak of qi-controlling realm. In the past, Chu Xiu could easily kill a physical invulnerability realm with internal invulnerability. But now, It was extremely difficult for him to kill an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers at the crown as a physical invulnerability realm, even if the person in front of him was actually old. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan said coldly, "I may be old, but I can still swing my fists." "Is that so? I wonder how many more fists you can swing now, old Master Jiang?" A glimmer of sharpness appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. He sheathed his saber and punched. His hand formed a seal, and the great Vajra wheel print suddenly fell. Golden Gangqi bloomed, suppressing evil and slaying demons. Seeing that Chu Xiu had actually used a Buddhist technique, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was also a little incredulous. This Chu Xiu was vicious and ruthless, and he did not leave any room for maneuvers. How could such a person use a Buddhist technique? What a joke! However, at this moment, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan could not be bothered to think about this. His old body once again exploded with extremely powerful Gangqi waves. As his punches landed, Gangqi bloomed like 100 flowers, stacking layer upon layer and exploding with astonishing might. The ingenuity of this fist technique was that it could explode one level of true qi twice, or even more, to the point of exploding. Spirit and qi as one, Gangqi fluttered and agitated. At this moment, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan seemed to have recovered to his peak, and his attacks were extremely powerful. Even though Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel print was extremely powerful, he could only be sent flying with a single punch, and even his internal organs were slightly shaken. However, right now, Chu Xiu seemed as if he did not feel it at all. He charged forward again and again in a frenzy, displaying the close combat killing technique of the 9 words formula to the extreme, and occasionally launching sneak attacks with the great violet sun palm. However, this evil palm technique was not very useful against a cultivator at the level of the Jiang clan's great ancestor. The great ancestor's inner force cultivation far surpassed Chu Xiu's. The moment the violet sun demonic flames entered his body, he forced them out, and in the end, he punched back at Chu Xiu. In the beginning, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan did not feel anything. Even the other cultivators from the Jiang clan saw that their great ancestor was still so valiant and had a strong aura. However, towards the end, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan felt that something was not right. The saying, "Fist is afraid of the young and strong," was somewhat problematic in the pugilistic world. However, if one was in the prime of his life while the other was in a declining state of vital energy and blood, then under the situation where both parties were about the same level, the former would most likely win. After all, as cultivators, the decline of their physical body would inevitably affect their battle prowess. Right now, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was old enough. He was so old that he had to go into seclusion and reduce his activities to extend his lifespan. Although he was suppressing Chu Xiu was exchanging his life for his injuries. Every time the great ancestor of the Jiang clan punched out, he was actually punching out his few remaining lives. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan took a deep breath, and a hint of determination appeared in his eyes. This was a calamity for the Jiang clan, and it was also karma. It was time to pay it back. Back then, when Jiang Shichen wanted to kill Fang Jingyuan, he had reported to him, and the great ancestor of the Jiang clan had agreed. That was because Fang Jingyuan's character was a little too inflexible. He was stubborn to the extreme, and he was unmoved by force or persuasion. Furthermore, Fang Jingyuan had already set his sights on the Jiang clan. Once he found something that could be used against them and caused a huge commotion, it would be extremely difficult for even Wei Juduan to protect the Jiang clan. That was why the Jiang clan took the risk and killed Fang Jingyuan. This way, no one would target the Jiang clan. Who would have thought that after the death of Fang Jingyuan, who was stubbornly adhering to the rules, a daring lunatic would appear? Although the former was troublesome, he would not take the Jiang clan's life. On the other hand, the latter would really dare to destroy the Jiang clan. Perhaps this was karma, but it was too late for regrets now. All he could do was to use all his strength to kill Chu Xiu. Only then could he win the last chance of survival for the Jiang clan. At this moment, white Gangqi surged around the great ancestor of the Jiang clan. The powerful force of his punch gathered at one point. It was unusually dazzling and resplendent. However, in comparison, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan seemed to have aged more than 10 years in an instant. He had an aura of decay. The aging and decaying body formed a very sharp contrast with the magnificent and resplendent force of the punch. However, when the punch landed, the powerful force directly enveloped the entire meeting hall. It was as if a vortex had formed, pulling everyone's attention into it. Facing the great ancestor of the Jiang clan's punch, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a hint of seriousness. Cultivators like the great ancestor of the Jiang clan, who had reached the end of their lifespan and could only drag out an ignoble existence, looked very weak. However, in reality, when it came time to fight with their lives on the line, they were more terrifying than anyone else. This was because existences like the great ancestor of the Jiang clan already knew that their lifespan was coming to an end and that they would definitely die. Therefore, in this final battle, they were able to disregard life and death and sublimate themselves to the extreme, erupting with their strongest power. The brilliant and magnificent punch was burning the life of the great ancestor of the Jiang clan. It was extremely powerful and blocked all the space around Chu Xiu's body to dodge, forcing him to take it head-on. Clenching the red sleeve blade in his hand, Chu Xiu's aura became extremely terrifying at this moment. It was as if he was a devil coming out of hell. Evil black gas with endless hatred lingered on Chu Xiu's blade. In Chu Xiu's eyes. When the blade slashed out, it was as if the gates of hell had opened. The cold intent made the temperature of the entire meeting hall drop instantly, as if it was a harsh winter. 3 blades of Avicii. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not use the first blade. Instead, he directly used the terrifying power of the second blade. The pitch-black blade light seemed to be on the verge of shattering under the dazzling fist force, but in the end, the terrifying demonic blade suddenly erupted with a shocking power of blood. With a loud bang, the fist force dissipated. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan looked at Chu Xiu as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, his body swayed and he fell to the ground with a loud bang. Great ancestor! Behind him, Jiang Shichen and the others cried out at the same time, their eyes filled with grief. Chapter 163. Even Chu Xiu couldn't fully control the power of the 3 blades of Avicii. In the past, when Chu Xiu used the second blade, he almost couldn't suppress the powerful backfire. But now, after using the second blade, Chu Xiu immediately formed the Zhe character formula and used the inner lion seal. The powerful force of the inner lion seal suppressed his own backfire easily. As the old ancestor of the Jiang family was killed, the other members of the Jiang family were in despair. Just as Chu Xiu said, this time, Chu Xiu wouldn't give them a chance to make a scene. The entire Jiang family was dead. Who would make a scene? Jiang Shichen shouted at the juniors of the Jiang family. Now, he only hoped that these talented juniors of the Jiang family could escape. In this way, the Jiang family would still have a glimmer of hope. However, at this time, Chu Xiu had used the inner lion seal to completely suppress the backfire of the 3 blades of Avicii. He walked over with the blade and said faintly, "Now you want to escape? It's too late." If the old ancestor of the Jiang family and Jiang Shichen had joined hands to stop Chu Xiu and the others, it was still possible for the rest of the Jiang family to escape. But now that the old ancestor of the Jiang family was dead, it was impossible for Jiang Shichen to stop Chu Xiu alone. The red sleeve blade slashed over. In an instant, the blade radiance was like a drizzle. The powerful blood-refined divine gang was mixed in the blade radiance and burst out. The powerful force made people tremble. It directly forced Jiang Shichen to the extreme. "I'll fight with you!" Jiang Shichen shouted angrily. At this time, the white gang qi around his body turned a bit red. The blood and qi in his body surged and began to burn crazily. When he punched, the blood-colored fist radiance made him look extremely terrifying. To think that you still have a sliver of leeway even after going all out. Compared to your old ancestor, you are far inferior. The first blade of the Avicii Dao's 3 blades slashed down with a loud rumble. The Avicii Dao's gate of death opened wide, and a pitch-black blade light streaked across the sky. Jiang Shichen's body fell to the ground with a loud bang. His body was directly cut into two, but strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Looking at Jiang Shichen's corpse, Chu Xiu shook his head. If Jiang Shichen really wanted to put his life on the line, Chu Xiu might be able to deter him. But just now, this fellow had still held back a little bit of strength, or perhaps he was imagining that he would be able to escape after severely injuring Chu Xiu. This was really courting death. He didn't even dare to go all out. If such a person didn't die, who would? With the death of the old ancestor of the Jiang family and Jiang Shichen, the other martial artists of the Jiang family were really not qualified to compete with the martial artists of the Guanzhong torture room. The martial artists who came from the Guanzhong torture room, whether they were trained by themselves or joined halfway like Chu Xiu, were at least a level higher than the martial artists of the Jianghu at the same level. For example, although there were a few physical invulnerability experts among the elders of the Jiang family, they were completely no match for Du Guangzhong and the others. After a quarter of an hour, Du Guangzhong walked over and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. With some discomfort, he said, "Official Chu, the people of the Jiang family have all been killed." What happened today could be said to be the biggest impact on Du Guangzhong. In the past, Du Guangzhong was a standard old-school constable of the Jianghu. Although he didn't have a chivalrous heart, he strictly followed the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. As a result, in recent years, he could be said to have completely degenerated. Not only did he embezzle taxes, but now he even massacred the martial arts forces in Guanzhong without sufficient evidence. He killed them all. It was the first time he had done such a thing, so he was not used to it. Go and open the Jiang family's treasury and other places. Move all the resources into the meeting hall, ordered Chu Xiu. After a while, Du Guangzhong and the other two immediately moved all the things into the meeting hall. There were martial arts manuals, cultivation resources, and some sabers, swords, weapons, purple gold, and other precious treasures. In total, there were more than a dozen big boxes. After calling all the warriors of the Guanzhong torture room who participated in the massacre, Chu Xiu looked at everyone present and said in a deep voice, "The Guanzhong torture room has its own rules, but I, Chu Xiu, also have my own rules, Chu Xiu. Those who are obedient will be rewarded, and those who put in the most effort will also be rewarded." Chu Xiu pointed at the things plundered from the Jiang family and said in a deep voice, 20% of these things are yours, 30% is mine, and 50% is to be handed over to the torture chamber. How much you can take doesn't depend on me, but on whether you have the ability to do it. As soon as these words were said, the constables of the patrol hall all showed surprise and excitement in their eyes. It wasn't that they hadn't seen good things before, but the Guanzhong torture room would never distribute things so simply and crudely like Chu Xiu. For example, the taxes of the Guanzhong torture room were collected from the bottom and then distributed to the lower levels according to the number of people. The amount given depended entirely on the internal decision of the torture chamber. But now, Chu Xiu placed all the benefits in front of them. How much they could take didn't depend on others, but only on their own ability. In this way, the things they could get were simply unimaginable for ordinary missions. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a look of contemplation. The Guanzhong torture room was very powerful. After Chu Kuanga laid the foundation for the Guanzhong torture room, Guanxiu was able to lead the Guanzhong torture room to rise because of the word rules. Although the rules of the Guanzhong torture room were really strict in the beginning, the lower levels of the Guanzhong torture room slacked off as time went on. Even if Guanxiu was really impartial, he couldn't control people's hearts. The resources that the Jianghu constables at the bottom could obtain were too little. In the beginning, they could still maintain some spirit, but in the end, the purpose of those Jianghu constables joining the Guanzhong torture hall had changed from being outstanding to idling around. When most of the constables felt that they had no hope of being promoted, they would usually slack off and start idling around. Anyway, as long as they didn't make any mistakes, they would always be members of the Guanzhong torture room, and they could also receive a decent salary on time. Although there wouldn't be any major problems in this way, it would make everything gloomy. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The land of Guanzhong has its current peace and order because of the Guanzhong torture room. All the credit for this is the foundation that the predecessors of the Guanzhong torture room laid down. However, some of the martial arts forces in the land of Guanzhong think that they are the masters of this place. They disregard the law and discipline and don't take the Guanzhong torture room seriously. I don't care how the previous patrol inspector did things, and I don't care how the disciplinary officer does things. But in my, Chu Xiu's, territory, no matter if it's a sect or an aristocratic family, all of you must learn one word: reverence. Don't be afraid of making a big deal out of this. Even if you do, I will still support you. The constables and constables present all had a strange look in their eyes. They said in a low voice, "Yes, sir." For the constables and constables in the Jian Province Inspector Hall, they had been sulking for a long time. Before Fang Xingyuan, all the inspectors in the Jian Province Inspector Hall were mediocre people. All they wanted was stability. As long as they didn't cause any big trouble, they would basically give in to the sects and aristocratic families under them. Later on, when Fang Xingyuan became the inspector, although he wouldn't give in to the sects and aristocratic families, he was very pedantic. He would only make a move after there was conclusive evidence. However, the crux of the problem was that if the sects and aristocratic families in the Jian province did something that violated the laws of the Guanzhong torture room, could they leave any obvious loopholes? Moreover, Fang Xingyuan was not only pedantic to outsiders, he was also very strict with his own people. This caused his subordinates to have a lot less gray income, causing complaints. His reputation was even worse than the previous few mediocre inspectors. But now, everything that Chu Xiu displayed made them see something different. That was domineering. The Guanzhong torture room was originally revered in the land of Guanzhong. In the end, they lived such a sullen life. Just as Chu Xiu said, they should let the sects and aristocratic families know what it meant to be in awe and who should be the master of the land of Guanzhong. It didn't matter if you were guilty or not, and it didn't matter if they had evidence on their side. In any case, as long as they said you were guilty, you were guilty. It was that simple. Of course, what made these constables and constables approve of Chu Xiu the most was Chu Xiu's generosity. He gave them 20% of the Jiang family's resources. This was already a very generous move. Looking at Chu Xiu's current attitude, it was likely that he would be like this in the future. Seeing the momentum of these people, Chu Xiu nodded in satisfaction. When Chu Xiu first saw these constables and constables under Jianghu Prefecture, he felt that these people were shrouded in a sense of lethargy. Their morale was extremely low. This was not a good sign. Now that there was a great reward, these people had some motivation. Of course, in Chu Xiu's opinion, their strength was still somewhat low. Maybe it was because Chu Xiu had stayed with the assassins in the Heavenly Sin branch for a long time and liked to use them as a benchmark. That was why he felt that the constables and constables in Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall were weak. In fact, the strength of these people was considered relatively outstanding among the warriors of the same rank, and the assassins in the Heavenly Sin branch were the elites among the warriors of the same rank. Otherwise, if the Heavenly Sin branch leader had relaxed the selection of assassins, the Heavenly Sin branch wouldn't only have a pitiful 100 people. Du Guangzhong and the other two looked at each other. It was only now that they seemed to understand some of official Chu's style of doing things. However, this feeling was not bad. At the very least, it was much better than Fang Xingyuan and the previous few inspectors. Take some people and bring all the items back to the inspector hall. Also, let your subordinates spread the Jiang family's crime to all the cities in Jianghu Prefecture. Thoroughly prove their crimes, Chu Xiu ordered. Yes, my lord. Du Guangzhong and the other two cupped their hands and immediately carried out the order. A day later, in the Shang Prefecture that was close to Jianghu Prefecture, Wei Hanshan received the news from his subordinates. His expression suddenly changed and he said coldly, "This Chu Xiu is simply too audacious." Chapter 164. Wei Hanshan did not have a close relationship with the Jiang family. After knowing that the Jiang family was destroyed by Chu Xiu, Wei Hanshan was so angry because Chu Xiu had affected his interests. The Jiang family had promised to transfer a part of their business to the Shangzhou Prefecture so that he could also get a part of the filial piety. But now that the Jiang family was destroyed by Chu Xiu, Who could he ask for his part of the filial piety? Moreover, Chu Xiu's way of doing things was simply breaking the rules. It was normal for some sects or aristocratic families in Guangzhou to secretly do some illegal but highly profitable business such as smuggling. As long as they did not cause too much trouble, basically no one would care. But at the same time, these sects and aristocratic families would also give some filial piety to their superiors to let them go or pretend that they did not see what they had done. These were some of the unspoken rules that the Guangzhou torture room had in secret. But now, Chu Xiu's domineering behavior had broken these unspoken rules. Although Chu Xiu was doing this in his own territory, he was representing the Guangzhou torture room. His actions did not only implicate him. What nonsense! Wei Hanshan snorted coldly. He immediately called for people to change into the clothes of the Guangzhou torture room and go to the Jianghu prefecture. These secret, unspoken rules were not set by the Guangzhou torture room, but they were the benefits that the inspectors obtained after compromising with the local martial arts forces. It was unknown whether the entire Guangzhou torture room was like this, but it was what they did in Guangxi. Now that Chu Xiu, a newcomer who did not know anything, broke these unspoken rules, it was hard to guarantee that Wei Hanshan and the other inspectors would not be treated as enemies by the sects in the martial arts world. When that happened, it would be difficult to collect the money. In the Jianghu prefecture, Chu Xiu was personally leading people to divide the treasures and resources obtained from the Jiang family. Although these things were in triplicate, they could not be distributed at will. Naturally, they had to prioritize their own interests first. Therefore, Chu Xiu would make a selection in advance and let others categorize them according to his standards. Then, he would choose what he needed first. At this moment, Du Guangzhong suddenly walked in and said, "My lord, the Shang Prefecture's patrol inspector Wei Hanshan is here." Chu Xiu frowned. What is he doing here? Chu Xiu hadn't forgotten Wei Hanshan's attitude towards him when they were at the Guangxi Torture Hall's branch. It wasn't friendly at all. Du Guangzhong smiled bitterly and said, "Sir Wei's mood seems to be somewhat bad, so this subordinate did not dare to ask too much." "Then let's go meet him," Chu Xiu said lightly. With Wei Hanshan's sudden visit, Chu Xiu could roughly guess the other party's intentions. Apart from him destroying the Jiang clan, what else could attract the other party's attention? When Chu Xiu arrived at the meeting hall, Wei Hanshan was already sitting there waiting with a gloomy expression. When he saw Chu Xiu walk in, Wei Hanshan immediately snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, how dare you? You've only taken over as patrol inspector for a few days, yet you've already caused such a huge commotion. You actually dared to destroy the Jiang clan, a family with such a long history, without any evidence. Do you still have any respect for the Guangzhou torture room's rules?" Chu Xiu sat down calmly and took a sip of tea. Then he raised two fingers and said lightly, "First, I have evidence to destroy the Jiang clan. I, Chu Xiu, have always done things with reason and evidence. Why would I take action without evidence?" Second, Chu Xiu raised his head and revealed a trace of coldness in his eyes. He said, "Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to control whether I'm bold or not? Don't forget that you and I are both inspectors. You can't control me if you want to meddle in other people's business." When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Wei Hanshan's expression immediately became extremely gloomy. Indeed, he and Chu Xiu were both inspectors. However, Chu Xiu was only a physical invulnerability expert, while he was already an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers above the crown. Wei Hanshan laughed coldly at the other party's provocation and said, "Who do I think I am? Fine, fine, fine. Today, I'll show you who I really am. Don't think that just because you joined the Guangzhou torture room and became an inspector, you can be on equal footing with us inspectors of Guangxi. Whether it's inside the Guangzhou torture room or outside the Guangzhou torture room, it all depends on strength." As soon as he finished speaking, a long, narrow, and slender silver-white long saber appeared in Wei Hanshan's hand. A dense chill lingered on the edge of the saber. When the saber slashed out, the icy cold Gang Qi was like a silver waterfall, slashing toward Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu moved later but arrived first. The blood-refined divine Gang on the red-sleeve saber sword, and the scarlet Gang Qi collided with Wei Hanshan's saber. Suddenly, there was an explosion of Gang Qi. Both Wei Hanshan's Gang Qi and the saber's Gang Qi disappeared in midair. It was actually a draw. Wei Hanshan's eyes suddenly revealed a touch of surprise. He didn't use his full strength in that attack just now. After all, they were both inspectors. He could teach Chu Xiu a lesson, but he couldn't kill Chu Xiu in public. Even so, he was still a realm stronger than Chu Xiu. Unexpectedly, Chu Xiu's Gang Qi was really terrifying. That Gang Qi, which contained an astonishing amount of blood Qi and evil Qi, could easily block his Gang Qi. Wei Hanshan snorted coldly and changed the momentum of his saber. Endless cold Qi condensed on the edge of his saber, and the Gang Qi stretched for dozens of feet. In terms of accumulation, he was, after all, an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers above the head. In terms of strength, his strength far exceeded Chu Xiu's. The momentum of the saber whistled down like a gale. Wherever it passed, the cold Qi actually condensed a layer of ice on the ground. The red sleeve saber in Chu Xiu's hand had already condensed a trace of black mist around it. The power of the 3 blades of Avicii was displayed and slashed down with a loud bang. The evil chill was even stronger than Wei Hanshan's ice Gang Qi. Infernal hell bloomed, and the power of the 3 blades of Avicii shocked even Wei Hanshan. He had been an inspector in the Guanzhong torture room for several years. He had come into contact with all kinds of demonic murderers, so he had a relatively good understanding of demonic cultivation methods. However, no matter which demonic murderer's cultivation method, it was not as evil and terrifying as Chu Xiu's saber. With a loud explosion of Gang Qi, the 3 blades of Avicii directly defeated Wei Hanshan's saber. The power even made Wei Hanshan's heart palpitate. At this time, Chu Xiu still did not stop. Instead, the black Qi on his saber became thicker. He was actually preparing to break out the 2nd blade of the 3 blades of Avicii. Just as Wei Hanshan had said before, whether it was inside the Guanzhong torture room or outside the Guanzhong torture room, as a warrior, everyone had to look at their strength. Although Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan were both Guanxi inspectors, it was obvious that Wei Hanshan and the others had never treated Chu Xiu as an existence on the same level as them. If it were someone else, would Wei Hanshan dare to come and reprimand Chu Xiu directly? That would be a provocation. He would only send someone to find out the other party's attitude and background, and would not act as overbearing as he was now. Therefore, this time, Chu Xiu did not have the slightest intention of holding back. Didn't you want to look at my strength? Fine, today I will show you my strength. Feeling the power contained in Chu Xiu's saber, Wei Hanshan's eyes revealed a hint of ruthlessness. This time, he had only planned to teach Chu Xiu a lesson, but he did not expect his opponent to be so domineering. Moreover, his strength was somewhat beyond his imagination. He was only in the physical invulnerability stage, and yet he was able to fight with him to this extent. No wonder he had entered the Longhu list. However, a physical invulnerability stage was still a physical invulnerability stage, and the gap of a large realm was not that easy to make up for. Wei Hanshan grasped the long saber in his hand, and all the Gang Qi in his body condensed on the long saber. The cold Gang Qi actually underwent a very strange change, condensing into ice crystals that circled around his long saber like snowflakes. In the past, Wei Hanshan had once traveled to the far north snow mountain to observe the scene of an avalanche and comprehend the true meaning of martial arts. He had also once sparred with the warriors of the far north snow mountain and finally created this move, Parting Ice Slash, as his trump card. Unless he was facing an extremely difficult opponent, Wei Hanshan would not use this move easily. The impact of condensing the ice true Qi was like an avalanche. It was indeed powerful, but the backlash was also great, so he would not use it often. But now that he was facing Chu Xiu, he was already forced to this extent by a physical invulnerability stage martial artist. If he did not use his trump card, he might really be at a disadvantage in the hands of Chu Xiu. Just as the two were about to explode with their strongest attacks, a figure rushed in front of them. His Gang Qi dissipated like a cool breeze, diluting the heavy atmosphere between the two. The person who suddenly appeared was the Lin State Prefecture's inspector, Jiang Taoran, who was also one of the inspectors who worked closely with Chu Xiu. At this moment, Jiang Taoran cupped his hands in greeting and said with a smile, "Both of you, we are all colleagues, so why must we fight? The Guanzhong torture room is internal strife, and the spectators are outsiders, so please calm down first." Seeing Jiang Taoran's appearance, Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan knew that they would not be able to fight this time, so they snorted coldly and put away their weapons. But when Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Taoran's smiling face, his eyes revealed a hint of deep meaning. This person was also not easy to deal with. Lin State City, the center of the Lin State Prefecture, was not far from Jianghu City, so he should have arrived long ago. But in the end, he did not appear earlier or later, but waited until the crucial moment of his battle with Wei Hanshan to act as a peacemaker. Clearly, he had his own intentions. If Chu Xiu did not show his strength, then Jiang Taoran would probably have to wait until he was seriously injured before he stepped in to be the peacemaker. He would not let the matter get out of hand, and at the same time, he would gain his gratitude. Wei Hanshan looked at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you have run amok and broken the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. This matter is not over. I will report this matter to Lord Wei and let him handle it. If we continue to let someone like you be the inspector, the reputation of the Guanxi torture room branch will be ruined by you." After saying that, Wei Hanshan snorted coldly and turned to leave. Chapter 165. After Wei Hanshan left, Jiang Taoran shook his head at Chu Xiu with a bitter smile. "Brother Chu, it seems like you've caused quite a bit of trouble this time. Generally speaking, disputes between inspectors would not be reported to Lord Wei, but this time, it seems like you've angered Wei Hanshan to the point that he actually reported this matter to Lord Wei." What Chu Xiu did not affect him at all. Every inspector had their own ways of making money. Jiang Taoran was a slicker, and the way he did things was more secretive. On the surface, he naturally received bribes from the martial arts forces under him, but in reality, he was secretly supporting a small aristocratic family that specialized in smuggling. All the money they obtained belonged to him, so what the other sects and aristocratic families thought had little to do with him. He only appeared here to fish in troubled waters. If Wei Hanshan could get rid of Chu Xiu, he would also be interested in the Jian province prefecture. On the other hand, if Chu Xiu made Wei Hanshan lose face, he would also be in a good mood. This was because his relationship with Wei Hanshan was not considered good. A part of the Shang province prefecture was bordered by his Lin province prefecture, and there were many conflicts between the two sides. Looking at Jiang Taoran, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I will explain to Lord Wei." "So what if Wei Hanshan is dissatisfied? We are both inspectors, can he eat me?" Jiang Taoran's face revealed a trace of an inexplicable smile. "All right then, I will wait to see official Chu's response." After saying this, Jiang Taoran also left. Outside the meeting hall, Du Guangzhong and the others walked out with a worried expression. "Lord, if Wei Hanshan reports this matter to Lord Wei Juduan, it will be very troublesome." The reason why a patrol was called a patrol was that this position had the authority to patrol an area. However, they were only an inspector, not a manager. If Chu Xiu did such a big thing behind Wei Juduan's back, it was hard to guarantee that Wei Juduan would not be angry. Chu Xiu asked, "Do you still remember that I asked you to split half of the loot from destroying the Jiang clan?" Du Guangzhong was stunned and said, "Yes, but shouldn't those be handed over to the Guanzhong torture room?" Chu Xiu's face revealed a hint of confusion. That was prepared to be handed over to Lord Wei. In Guanxi, Lord Wei represents the Guanzhong torture room. Du Guangzhong nodded thoughtfully. They seemed to have guessed something. Wei Hanshan's words were not meant to scare Chu Xiu. He had lost face in front of Chu Xiu. Even with his strength, he was unable to suppress Chu Xiu. Of course, he would report this matter to Wei Juduan. Although this kind of behavior felt like a complaint, it was also the most effective. Although it could be said that Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanqing, if he could not maintain his position as inspector, then he could not blame Wei Juduan for not giving Chu Yuanqing any face. 3 days later, the Guanxi torture chamber sent someone to summon Chu Xiu to discuss matters at the branch. In reality, it was to ask him about the Jiang clan's extermination. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Guanxi torture chamber's meeting hall, other than Wei Juduan, the other 5 inspectors were also present. Other than Wei Hanshan, who was looking at Chu Xiu maliciously, the others were also sizing up Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. Exterminating a large clan right after taking office was something that even they, who had been patrol envoys for over a decade, did not dare to do. Wasn't Chu Xiu's actions a little too audacious? Wei Juduan sat on the main seat. Although he was old, his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. Even he had not expected that Chu Xiu, who had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, would be so daring. He had exterminated a powerful clan right after taking over the position of inspector. In reality, the Guanzhong torture room had destroyed many clans, especially after Guan Xiu had taken over the Guanzhong torture room. In the past, when Chu Kuanga had taken over the Guanzhong torture room, the Guanzhong torture room had established itself in Guanzhong because of Chu Kuanga's personal charisma. In Guanzhong, whether it was the torture chamber or the clans and sects, they were all obedient to Chu Kuanga. Even if some people had small schemes, they did not dare to show it. When Guan Xiu had taken over the Guanzhong torture room, he had relied on harsh punishments. Anyone who violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, even if they were his personal disciples, would not be spared. Therefore, at that time, if there was anyone in Guanzhong who disobeyed the rules of the torture chamber, their clan would be exterminated without any mercy. Of course, that was only 30 years ago, when Guan Xiu had just taken over the Guanzhong torture room. Now that the Guanzhong torture room had stabilized, and the various inspectors and torturers had great power, they had a tacit understanding with the local martial arts factions. This kind of thing had not happened for a while. What truly infuriated Wei Juduan that Chu Xiu had done such a thing was that the Jiang family had some connection to him. During his birthday, the Jiang clan had gifted him a precious heart-warming jade Buddha statue. Wei Juduan still remembered this. In the end, only a short time had passed, and the Jiang family had been destroyed by his own subordinates. This was a slap to his face. How would the people of Guanxi look at him now? Looking straight at Chu Xiu, Wei Juduan said coldly, "Chu Xiu, I need an explanation for this. The Guanzhong torture room is not a place where you can do whatever you want." In an instant, a solemn pressure attacked Chu Xiu, almost making it difficult for him to breathe. In fact, in terms of strength, the old Wei Juduan was naturally no match for the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, but in terms of power, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader was far inferior to Wei Juduan. The Heavenly Sin Branch leader had been a lone assassin in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. Later on, he had been in charge of the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, but he had only had 100 or so subordinates, not even as many as Chu Xiu's subordinates. Meanwhile, Wei Juduan had been in charge of Guanxi for decades, and he was even more experienced than Hall Master Guan Xiu. There were thousands of constables and bailiffs under him, and they were all elites of the martial arts world. With this kind of power, Wei Juduan, who had been in a high position for many years, naturally had an aura that was even stronger than the Heavenly Sin Branch leaders. Under Wei Juduan's pressure, Chu Xiu stood up and cupped his hands. "Milord, the Jiang family smuggled contraband and disregarded the laws of the Guanzhong torture room. Their crimes are punishable by death. I have done everything according to the rules." Before Wei Juduan could speak, Wei Hanshan sneered. "Rules? Are your so-called evidence the rules? Chu Xiu, do you take us for idiots?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Let's not talk about whether or not I take you for an idiot. Milord Wei is asking questions here, so what right do you have to speak? Or do you think that your status is high enough to compare to Milord Wei's?" Wei Hanshan choked on Chu Xiu's words. Feeling Wei Juduan's gaze on him, he could only angrily snort and say no more. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Wei Juduan. "Milord, there is a reason for destroying the Jiang family. However, the reason involves a few secrets. I would like to report it to you alone." Hearing this, Wei Hanshan immediately frowned. Without him in front of him, who knew what kind of sophistry this Chu Xiu would spout? However, Wei Judwan was already very dissatisfied with his interruption, so Wei Hanshan didn't dare say anything else. Looking deeply at Chu Xiu, Wei Judwan said indifferently, "Come in with me." Coming to a study, Wei Judwan said coldly, "Speak, but let me remind you, think carefully before you speak. Don't think that I am senile. The Guanzhong lands are not in my grasp. I know exactly what you did in the Jiang family." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Milord, I do not have evidence to destroy the Jiang family. I also know some of the secret rules of the Guanzhong torture room. In destroying the Jiang family this time, I have already plundered all the wealth and resources of the Jiang family. I will offer half of it to Milord." Wei Judwan froze at these words. He had guessed that Chu Xiu would have a glib tongue to defend himself, but he had not guessed that Chu Xiu would say something like this. Wei Judwan narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you bribing me? I did not think that the person that great hero Chu recommended into the Guanzhong torture room would be this kind of person." Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Although I was recommended into the Guanzhong torture room by great hero Chu, I am not the kind of person who cannot recognize reality. The previous patrol inspector Fang Jingyuan is a good example. I can be upright and outspoken, I can also be impartial, but the prerequisite is that I have sufficient strength. My strength is insufficient, so this method does not suit me." Wei Judwan sized up Chu Xiu. In truth, he was somewhat surprised. He had thought that for Chu Xiu to be recommended into the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanqing, he would definitely be someone like Fang Jingyuan. He did not think that Chu Xiu would be able to see it so clearly. However, Wei Judwan still said coldly, "If you want to use half of the Jiang family's assets to fool this matter, I'm afraid you are thinking too simply. I might as well be frank with you. The Jiang family is very tactful, and I am very satisfied. But in the end, you destroyed the Jiang family without my permission. Have you ever taken me seriously? If I do not punish you this time, how will the martial arts forces in Guanxi see me? The Guanzhong torture room has rules. The rules are like this in the open, and the rules are like this in the dark." Chu Xiu laughed coldly in his heart. His immediate superior's appetite was really big. Even half of the Jiang family's assets could not satisfy his appetite. However, the current Wei Judwan was in line with Chu Xiu's previous conjecture. This old torturer had probably completely abandoned his duty as the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room and only cared about his own interests. However, this was a good thing for Chu Xiu. If Wei Judwan was really fair, strict, and outspoken, Chu Xiu would not have dared to do things so ruthlessly. Chu Xiu bowed to Wei Judwan and said with a solemn expression, "Sir Wei, rules are rules. This time, I attacked the Jiang family not only because they were disrespectful to me, but also because the Jiang family has been secretly tarnishing your reputation, Sir Wei. The Jiang family gifted Lord Wei a heart-calming and warm jade Buddha, but in the end, the Jiang family secretly used this to intimidate others and committed outrages in Jianghu Prefecture, all using Lord Wei's name. The Jiang family even said in secret that since the money has been spent, of course they have to maximize your remaining value, Sir Wei." Chapter 166. Wei Judwan found the words, surplus value, exceptionally grating on his ears. The main experts of the Guanzhong torture room were the 4 disciplinary officers and the leaders of the Punishment Bureau. The leader of the Punishment Bureau needed to be strong enough, while the disciplinary officers needed to be strong enough. Otherwise, they would not be able to control so many inspectors and martial sects under their command. Wei Judwan's position as the disciplinary officer had something to do with his ability, but it was mostly because of his seniority. Wei Judwan had been in the Guanzhong torture room for over 100 years. His seniority was even greater than Guan Xiu's. This seniority meant that as long as Wei Judwan did not make any major mistakes, his position would be more stable than anyone else's. But at the same time, it also meant that he was about to retire. The Guanzhong torture room was not a place to retire. Some of the martial artists in the aristocratic families were old, but because of their bloodline, even if they could not fight, they would still be called ancestors and be revered by their descendants. The sects were also very respectful to these old martial artists. Usually, they would give them the position of Grand Elder, which was a very respectable position. Only the Guanzhong torture room was different. After the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room retired, they were not allowed to interfere with the power of the Guanzhong torture room. Even their subordinates would cut off all relations with them and be loyal to their new superiors. As the saying went, a new ruler would have a new group of subordinates. This was the rule of the Guanzhong torture room. It allowed the power to always be in the hands of a small number of people. It was not like those large sects and aristocratic families, where there would always be some old people pointing fingers and telling them what to do, affecting the authority of the family head or sect leader. Wei Zhiduan was already very old. He would probably retire in a few years. At that time, it would be the turn of a new disciplinary officer. That was why in the last few years of his position as the disciplinary officer, Wei Zhiduan's table manners were so unsightly that he had reached the point of being greedy. He did not care about the laws of the Guanzhong torture room at all. He was thinking about his future after he retired. But although he was prepared to give up his power after he retired, he could not tolerate outsiders discussing these things. Wei Zhiduan narrowed his eyes and asked Chu Xiu in a cold voice, "Did the Jiang family really say that?" Chu Xiu said righteously, "Of course that's what I said. If Lord Wei doesn't believe me, you can send someone to investigate." Recently, the Jiang clan has been borrowing Lord Wei's name to intimidate others and have done all kinds of things that are out of line. The people of the Jiang clan were not idiots. Of course, they would not say such things in public, but in reality, the Jiang clan had always been doing so. After all, the Jiang clan had paid a huge price to establish a connection with Wei Zhiduan. Who knew how long Wei Zhiduan would be able to hold the position of the disciplinary officer? Of course, they had to make the best use of their resources. They wanted to obtain as many benefits as possible while Wei Zhiduan was still the disciplinary officer. As long as Wei Zhiduan sent people to inquire, he would be able to easily find out about these matters. At that time, whether or not the Jiang clan had said such things would no longer be important. In any case, the direct descendants of the Jiang clan were all dead. Their previous actions could represent everything. And at this moment, Chu Xiu took another step forward and said in a low voice, "Lord Wei, this subordinate has something else to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Wei Zhiduan narrowed his eyes and said, "What is it?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Jiang clan dares to say such things not only because the people of the Jiang clan have forgotten their principles for the sake of profit, but also because they see that Lord Wei is about to retire and step down as the disciplinary officer. They no longer have any power, so their fear of you has greatly decreased. Lord Wei, after you step down as the disciplinary officer, you will definitely have to cultivate in the Guanxi region. And the few patrols under your command, forgive me for being blunt, only know how to scheme and scheme against each other. I'm afraid that after you step down, they will all be gone." When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Wei Zhiduan's expression turned a little ugly. This was because Chu Xiu's words were exactly what he was thinking. Wei Zhiduan had always been a very greedy person, including his own people. Thus, he controlled the Guanxi region by relying on his qualifications and some trickery. He didn't have a single trusted aide that he was willing to spend a large sum of money to groom. However, although he didn't have any trusted aides that he could rely on, he was still able to manage the people in the Guanxi region in an orderly manner with his strength and experience. But now that he was about to step down as the disciplinary officer, he realized that he didn't even have a single person that he could rely on. He could hear the meaning behind Chu Xiu's words. It was nothing more than a way of expressing his loyalty. However, Wei Zhiduan still sized up Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "You mean that you can become my trusted aide? But your backer is Chu Yuanxing. Why bother coming to me, an old man who is about to retire? Moreover, you, Chu Xiu, aren't easy to deal with. Others are scheming against each other, but won't you be the same as them?" Chu Xiu lowered his head and looked at the ground. He said, "After all, great hero Chu isn't from the Guanzhong torture room. He can't interfere with the specific affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. The county magistrate might as well take charge. I only know that my superior is you, Lord Wei. Instead of currying favor with great hero Chu, I might as well pledge my loyalty to you, Lord Wei." Wei Judwan narrowed his eyes and subconsciously played with the dragon pattern iron ball in his hand. He said indifferently, "But the crux of the problem is, why should I believe in your loyalty?" Chu Xiu lowered his head and said in a low voice, "The other inspectors all have a foundation in the Guanzhong torture room. I'm afraid they are all waiting for Lord Wei to retire so that they can have a chance to take over, or to cozy up to the new disciplinary officer. In the entire Guanxi branch, only I, Chu Xiu, have no foundation at all. I need Lord Wei's support to have a foothold in the Guanxi region. Without Lord Wei, I'm nothing. Even if you've retired, I still need Lord Wei's connections and prestige in the Guanxi region. So, you don't have to worry about whether I'm loyal to you or not. As long as I have any intention of disobeying you, Lord Wei, you can take everything away from me at any time." Wei Judwan looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He had been in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years, and he had seen Wei Judwan fawning over him. He had also seen Wei Judwan who feared him or expressed loyalty to him. The only person he had never seen before was someone like Chu Xiu. To show his loyalty, Chu Xiu would directly hand over his own weaknesses to him. However, this feeling was very good. Just as Chu Xiu had said, he had no foundation in the Guanxi region. Just like today's matter, Wei Judwan could deal with him or not. It all depended on his mood and attitude. Now that the other inspectors were fully fledged and had their own foundations, they were no longer someone an old man like him who was about to retire could casually deal with. So, as long as he accepted Chu Xiu's loyalty, it was equivalent to him gaining an inspector who was completely under his control. Wei Judwan put his dragon pattern iron ball on the table and said in a deep voice, "It's very simple for you to pledge loyalty to me, and it's also very simple for me to accept your loyalty. However, the crux of the problem is, what can I get from you, and what can you get from me?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "What I want is only to obtain Milord's trust. Just like this time, as long as Milord can help me deal with the matters within the rules, then I will definitely bring Milord even more benefits. Half of the Jiang family's assets is just the beginning." Wei Judwan looked deeply at Chu Xiu and was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I hope my choice is not wrong, and you'd better not disappoint me." "Please rest assured, Lord. I will definitely not disappoint you." Chu Xiu lowered his head, a faint smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. He knew that Wei Judwan would definitely agree in the end, because compared to what he needed Wei Judwan needed him more. For a torture master who was about to retire and lose some power, Wei Judwan had already given up on all the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. As long as it could bring him benefits, he would greedily swallow it up. Now that Chu Xiu could bring him benefits, he could not and would not refuse. At this time, outside the meeting hall, Wei Hanshan was already a little anxious. Only the heavens knew what Chu Xiu had said to Wei Judwan and why the two of them had not come out after so long. At this time, Wei Judwan and Chu Xiu walked back into the meeting hall. Chu Xiu's face was expressionless, but Wei Hanshan was already a little anxious. The calmer Chu Xiu was, the more it showed that this matter would not develop in the direction he expected. As expected, Wei Judwan directly said to the crowd, "Chu Xiu, I have already asked about this matter. The Jiang family secretly smuggled contraband and violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, they used my name to commit crimes outside. They should be killed." Chu Xiu, a newly appointed patrol inspector, was able to dig out this cancer of the Jiang family. Not only should he not be punished for this matter, he should be rewarded instead. When they heard this, everyone's expressions suddenly changed. What did Chu Xiu say to Wei Judwan to actually make Wei Judwan stand on his side so clearly? Wei Hanshan even stood up and said with an expression of dissatisfaction, "Lord, this Chu Xiu does not follow the rules when he does things. He has already brazenly done it. Is this still not a problem?" Wei Judwan's expression immediately darkened. He looked coldly at Wei Hanshan and said, "Are you teaching me how to do things? Do you need me to go talk to Master Guan and give up my position as torture officer to you right now?" When he heard this, Wei Hanshan could only sullenly sit back down and said in a muffled voice, "This subordinate does not dare." Wei Hanshan's connections in the Guanxi region could be said to be deep-rooted. Other than the Guanzhong torture room, He even had connections in the Guangzhou martial world. However, no matter how strong his connections were, Wei Jieduan was still the Guanxi torture officer. He was someone who held great power. If he said something was right, even if it was wrong, it was still right. At least before Wei Jieduan officially retired and relinquished his power, Wei Hanshan did not dare to directly confront Wei Jieduan. Chapter 167. The 5 inspectors present didn't know what Chu Xiu had said to Wei Jieduan, but they knew that since Wei Jieduan had made a decision, Chu Xiu didn't do anything wrong, then he didn't do anything wrong. Whoever dared to object would be slapping Wei Jieduan in the face. Other than Wei Hanshan, the others didn't have any direct conflicts with Chu Xiu. Of course, they wouldn't provoke Wei Jieduan at this time. Looking at everyone present, Wei Jieduan said indifferently, "Since it's like this, then disperse. Remember to manage your own territory. Don't worry about other people's matters." Actually, Wei Jieduan had a good impression of Wei Hanshan. Although this subordinate of his had always been a little scheming, he knew how to be filial to him and did things very well on the surface. But in the end, he was a little muddle-headed today and actually dared to refute his orders in front of everyone. This needed to be taught a lesson. Chu Xiu revealed a trace of a smile, stood up, and cupped his hands. "Yes, sir." After saying that, Chu Xiu was the first to leave the meeting hall. The others also left one after another. Only Wei Hanshan left with a gloomy expression. After everyone left, a young man in his 30s walked into the meeting hall and bowed respectfully to Wei Jieduan. "Foster father." Wei Jieduan looked at the young man in front of him and nodded. "Yang Ling, how is the matter with the sects in Last Sun Prefecture?" Yang Ling said, "It has been handled properly. Those sects think that foster father is about to retire, so they have some ideas that they shouldn't have. This child has already brought people to teach them a lesson." Wei Jieduan nodded and said, "That's right. Some people just need to be taught a lesson." Yang Ling paused and asked, "Foster father, I saw everything clearly just now. It was clearly Chu Xiu who broke the rules. Why are you still covering for him?" Wei Jieduan glanced at him and revealed a faint smile. "But are you afraid that Chu Xiu will affect your position?" "I don't dare." Yang Ling quickly cupped his hands. Wei Jieduan said indifferently, "You don't need to think too much. From now on, Chu Xiu is my man. However, he won't affect your position. After all, Chu Xiu is just an outsider, but you are my adopted son who I have raised for more than 10 years. Due to the rules of the Guangzhou torture room, I can't help you get to a higher position for the time being. Even Master Guan's disciple, Yuqi, can only be an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division. Even if I wanted you to be an inspector, the rules wouldn't allow it. After I retire, I will support you to the position of patrol and let this Chu Xiu assist you. At that time, even if the new penal officer takes office, there will still be a place for you in Guanxi." Yang Ling immediately showed a grateful look and said, "Thank you, foster father." However, although Yang Ling expressed his gratitude, he was sneering in his heart. He had been at Wei Jieduan's beck and call for more than 10 years. How could he not know what his foster father was like? He said he was worried about the rules of the Guangzhou torture room, but in reality he didn't want him to be in power. Yuqi was indeed an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division, but he acted on Guan Siyu's warrant. His position in the criminal division was second only to the leaders. Yang Ling could only listen to Wei Jieduan's orders. When Wei Jieduan needed him, he could borrow Wei Jieduan's power and strength. It was equivalent to being an errand boy for Wei Jieduan. In the end, he had been running for more than 10 years. He had long been dissatisfied with this situation. However, other than being dissatisfied, he could only endure. He could only endure until Wei Jieduan retired. Only then could he truly be in power. At this time, in Wei Hanshan's mansion in the Jianghu prefecture, Wei Hanshan, who had returned to his mansion, was so angry that he smashed several cups. "Old fool, you're about to retire and leave, yet you're still playing this game with me." When he thought of Wei Jieduan's attitude, Wei Hanshan was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. Among the patrol envoys in the Guanxi area, Wei Hanshan wasn't the strongest, but he was the best at making money among those of the same rank. Not only did he manage the Shangzhou and Qinzhou prefectures in good order, but he also gave Wei Juduan a lot of filial piety. He also used his status in the Jianghu to help Wei Juduan a lot. However, today he sided with Chu Xiu in front of everyone and even gave him a warning. This made Wei Hanshan feel unusually angry. However, he had also been Wei Juduan's subordinate for more than 10 years, so he knew what kind of person his superior was. Wei Juduan was naturally suspicious, unkind, and greedy. He treated his foster son like this, let alone others. This time, Wei Juduan was standing on Chu Xiu's side because Chu Xiu had taken out enough money to move Wei Juduan. Wei Juduan was also probably wary of Wei Juduan's influence, so he gave him a warning. However, the crux of the problem was that Wei Juduan was about to retire and give up his position, yet he still firmly held onto his power and didn't give his subordinates the slightest chance. This was a little too much. Most importantly, this matter was a big blow to Wei Hanshan. He was prepared to deal with Chu Xiu, but in the end, not only did Chu Xiu not receive any punishment, but he even received a reward. Wei Hanshan, on the other hand, was disgraced. Not only would this matter affect his position in the hearts of his subordinates, but it would also affect the prestige of the forces under his jurisdiction. Not only did the Jiang clan not receive many benefits, but they also caused trouble for themselves. If he had known earlier, Wei Hanshan wouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. Of course, it was too late for Wei Hanshan to regret now. At this time, one of his trusted subordinates pushed open the door and entered. When he saw this scene, he immediately shrunk his neck and swallowed back the words he wanted to say. Wei Hanshan looked at his hesitant appearance and couldn't help but scold him. "If you have something to say, then say it. Don't bother me at this time." The martial artist hurriedly said, "This subordinate actually wanted to say, since Lord Wei doesn't care about this matter, why don't we report this matter to Master Guan? Chu Xiu's status is special. Although he was recommended by great hero Chu, because of this, he has received a lot of attention. Although Master Guan won't easily care about the matters of the patrol inspector, Master Guan will definitely care about Chu Xiu. After all, he has great hero Chu behind him." Wei Hanshan frowned and said, "What do you know? Go. Don't cause trouble here." After throwing that bailiff out, Wei Hanshan's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. He was actually a little tempted. As the hallmaster of the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu was concerned about the matters of the entire Guanzhong torture room. The people he directly interacted with were the disciplinary officers and the leaders of the punishment bureau. He naturally wouldn't ask about the small matters of the patrol inspectors. However, Chu Xiu was personally recommended by Chu Yuanxing. Perhaps Guan Xiu would ask about it? However, the only thing Wei Hanshan was worried about was Wei Juduan's attitude. After all, he was going to report Chu Xiu over Wei Juduan. This was equivalent to slapping Wei Juduan in the face and criticizing Wei Juduan for not doing his job. If Chu Xiu was punished in the end, then Wei Juduan would also be reprimanded. But when he thought of Wei Juduan's attitude today, Wei Hanshan sneered in his heart. "Since you're heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust." However, Wei Juduan had stayed in the Guanxi area for close to a century. He had accumulated too much prestige for too long. Wei Hanshan didn't dare to brazenly report Wei Juduan. Hence, Wei Hanshan planned to report this matter anonymously to the disciplinary hall's headquarters. He would first remove himself from the picture. Thinking up to this point, Wei Hanshan personally ordered a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly pass the message to the discipline hall headquarters. Several days later, inside the disciplinary hall's headquarters, Guan Xiu looked at the news that came from below. His eyes revealed a hint of surprise. Someone actually sent a report letter to him. This was really rare. This was something that had not happened for many years. Although the Guanzhong area wasn't small, it had a strict structure. Each level governed the next. It was very rare for this kind of situation of skipping a level to report happened. In the end, someone actually leaked the news to him. Clearly, there was a problem with the disciplinary hall's subordinates. They actually couldn't control their subordinates. Originally, This kind of matter that involved a low-level patrol inspector wouldn't be sent to Guanxiu. If he had to manage everything, then wouldn't Guanxiu be extremely busy? There were many people in the disciplinary hall's headquarters who were responsible for helping Guanxiu deal with information and official documents. After analyzing and filtering, they would report the information that really required Guanxiu's decision to Guanxiu. This time, when Chu Xiu's matter was sent to Guanxiu, it was really as Wei Hanshan thought. Because Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, his status was special, so he was sent to Guanxiu. After reading the news, Guanxiu called out softly, "Yuqi, come in." Hearing this, Yuqi pushed open the door and entered. He said respectfully, "Master, what's the matter?" Guanxiu handed the news to Yuqi and said, "What do you think of this news?" After Yuqi read the news, a strange look appeared in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected that Chu Xiu would cause such a huge commotion the moment he took office. Furthermore, his actions were decisive and ruthless. He didn't seem like a martialist that Chu Yuanxing had recommended to the Guanzhong torture room. It looked like he had been wrong. Although Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, he was definitely not the same kind of person as Chu Yuanxing. Yuqi put the news aside and raised his head to say to Guanxiu, "Master, I'm afraid Wei Juduan is getting old. He can't even control his subordinates. I'm afraid we have to change the disciplinary hall's candidate." Guanxiu asked for his opinion, but Yuqi didn't mention Chu Xiu at all. Instead, he directly talked about Wei Juduan. This made Guanxiu reveal a satisfied expression. Chapter 168. Yuqi was the disciple that Guanxiu had raised since he was young. If Guanxiu had a son, Yuqi's status might be even higher than Guanxiu's biological son. However, due to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room and Guanxiu's incorruptibility, he could let the person recommended by Chu Yuanxing enter the Guanzhong torture room to be a patrol inspector. However, he would not let his disciple hold an important position while he was still a hall master. Even so, he would still train Yuqi to see the big picture, such as now. What Chu Xiu had done was considered a major matter in the Jianghu prefecture, but in Guanxi, it could be suppressed by Wei Juduan with a single sentence. In the entire Guanzhong, it was just a small matter. If it weren't for Chu Xiu's status, this news would not have reached Guanxiu's desk. Therefore, when Guanxiu asked Yuqi for his opinion on this matter, Guanxiu would be disappointed if Yuqi's answer was only about whether Chu Xiu was right or wrong. However, Yuqi could see from this news that Wei Juduan could no longer completely control the Guanxi area. Only such an answer could be considered acceptable. Guanxiu nodded and said, "Wei Juduan is indeed a little old. When I first joined the Guanzhong torture room, he was already the torture officer. Later, he stayed in that position for decades. Unfortunately, the older one gets, the more they think. It is indeed time for him to retire." Yuqi said, "Actually, Wei Juduan should have retired a long time ago. However, Master, you saw that he had a senior position in the Guanzhong torture room, so you allowed him to continue in his current position. Otherwise, any leader from the criminal division could have been qualified for the position of torture officer." Guanxiu shook her head and said, "That's where you're wrong. Any one of the leaders of the judicial division is indeed stronger than Wei Juduan, but the position of disciplinary officer isn't something that can be achieved just by having strength. The disciplinary officer had to balance the various factions under his command and stabilize the order of the martial arts world. He had to have enough prestige and experience. Although the leaders of the criminal investigation department were quite strong, they were not as good as Wei Juduan in other aspects. Furthermore, the tasks of the criminal investigation department were also very important, so he still had to hold the position of criminal investigation officer for a period of time. Let me think about who can take over this position." However, Wei Juduan had indeed slacked off during this period of time. He couldn't even control his own subordinates. Send this information to Wei Juduan. There's no need to tell him how it came about. Let him investigate it himself. If he doesn't even know who skipped a rank to report it, then he really doesn't need to be the Guanxi penal officer anymore. Yuqi nodded and said, "What about Chu Xiu?" Guanxiu said indifferently, I wasn't wrong. This Chu Xiu isn't someone who knows his place. Although he did save Chu Yuanxing, he definitely had the intention of demanding repayment. However, with his relationship with Chu Yuanxing here, I can't punish him directly. Go to Chu Xiu first and ask him one thing. Tell him that I want an explanation. If his explanation is reasonable and satisfies me, then this matter will be over. If he can't give me a reasonable explanation, then his position as a patrol inspector will be over. Just throw him into the criminal division as a low-level secret agent. Yes, master. Yuqi nodded and immediately turned to leave. The atmosphere in the patrol hall of the Jian province prefecture was pretty good. The depressed looks of the constables and bailiffs had disappeared. In their eyes, this new lord's methods and strength were undoubtedly very brilliant. He had become famous after the battle of exterminating the Jiang family and re-established the prestige of the Jian province prefecture patrol hall. In the past, the martial arts factions that didn't take them seriously had taken the initiative to present gifts to them and befriend them. Furthermore, they could accept them openly and with a clear conscience. One had to know that when Fang Jingyuan was the patrol inspector, he was very strict with them. Accepting bribes was definitely not allowed to happen. Furthermore, in the Guanxi branch, Wei Jieduan had stripped Wei Han's Han of his dignity and sided with Chu Xiu. This allowed the matter of exterminating the Jiang family to be completely forgotten. This had also completely established Chu Xiu's position. Previously, when Chu Xiu had just taken over the position of patrol, he was just an outsider. His position hadn't been completely stabilized yet. Now, regardless of whether it was internally or externally, after these few incidents, his position as patrol inspector could be said to be impregnable. He had completely stabilized his position. In the study, Chu Xiu flipped through the news that Du Guangzhong and the others had brought. In fact, there weren't many major incidents. Most of them were minor matters. After all, the Jianzhou prefecture was only so big. There were a dozen or so small cities around it. What major incidents could there be under normal circumstances? Furthermore, Chu Xiu didn't monopolize power. Du Guangzhong and the other two still had a lot of autonomy. They would handle some of the unimportant matters and give Chu Xiu a result in the end. Therefore, Chu Xiu was very relaxed as a patrol inspector. He had obtained quite a lot of cultivation resources from the Jiang family. After giving Wei Jieduan and distributing them to his subordinates, there was still quite a lot left. It was enough for him to cultivate for a while. At this moment, Du Guangzhong suddenly knocked on the door and entered. With a nervous expression, he said, "Sir, Lord Yuqi from the headquarters is here. He says he wants to see you." One couldn't blame Du Guangzhong for being nervous. Yuqi's identity wasn't a secret in the Guangzhong torture room. He was Lord Guanxiyu's personal disciple. Even if his identity was just an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division, his status was actually very high. Even Wei Jieduan had to be very polite to him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Yuqi is here? Please come to the guest hall." Chu Xiu really didn't expect Yuqi to come at this time. As Guanxiyu's disciple, Yuqi often helped Guanxiyu handle various miscellaneous matters. It could be said that he was very busy. Why did he specially come to see Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu didn't have time to think too much. He directly stepped into the guest hall and put on a smile. "Brother Yuqi is here. I didn't go out to greet you. I hope you don't take offense." Yuqi took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "I am not some important person, so there is no need to greet me. Actually, I am here this time to ask you something on behalf of Master." "What is it?" Chu Xiu's expression didn't change as he asked. Yuqi took out the report letter and handed it to Chu Xiu. "Take a look at the contents. Master said that he wants an explanation, a reasonable explanation." Chu Xiu took the report letter and looked at the contents. He immediately frowned. Someone had actually reported this matter to Guanxiyu. This was indeed something he hadn't expected. Someone who did this was simply slapping Wei Jieduan in the face. Moreover, it was anonymous. The amount of information contained within was very large. Chu Xiu hadn't miscalculated Wei Jieduan's attitude, but he had overestimated Wei Jieduan's control over Guanxi. He hadn't retired yet, but the inspectors under him didn't take him seriously. Once he retired, the tea would cool down after he left. Regarding this report letter, the first person that Chu Xiu thought of was Wei Hanshan. After all, among the inspectors, only he had the most direct conflict with him. Of course, it was also possible that the person who reported this was someone else. You might know a person's face, but you didn't know his heart. Chu Xiu didn't know which people's interests he had interfered with and who didn't like him. Yuqi looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "Brother Chu, Master just wants an explanation. It's very simple. Haven't you thought about it yet?" Chu Xiu slowly put down the report letter. Since Guan Xiu had sent her personal disciple, was the explanation really that simple? Perhaps it was, but if he explained it incorrectly, then he might not be able to stabilize his position as inspector for long before he had to move. After returning the report letter to Yuqi, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Guanzhong torture room needs dignity. The Guanzhong torture room guards Guanzhong, but it is also the ruler of this place. The torture chamber's laws are judged by the Guanzhong torture room. Whether someone is guilty or not is also decided by the Guanzhong torture room. The Jiang family's matter has been determined, and the evidence is conclusive. They smuggled contraband and flouted the torture chamber's laws. They are guilty and deserve death. Destroying the Jiang family allowed the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall to regain the dignity that belonged to the Guanzhong torture room. This deal is very worthwhile." A smile appeared on Yuqi's face. "That's right, Brother Chu. I will bring your words back to Master." From the first sentence that Chu Xiu said, Yuqi knew that Chu Xiu had passed the test. Even if he had not seen Guan Xiu, he knew the result. Most of the rules of the Guanzhong torture room were set by Guan Xiu. Compared to Chu Kuanga, who used his personal charm to influence the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu used harsh punishments and rules to rule the Guanzhong torture room. Destroying the Jiang family was a small matter, and it was also a small matter whose interests it affected. The important thing was whether this matter would affect the reputation and interests of the Guanzhong torture room. Obviously, Chu Xiu's actions had only strengthened the Guanzhong torture room's prestige in the Jianghu Prefecture, so his explanation was reasonable and could pass the test. Yuqi stood up and smiled. "Since that's the case, then there's nothing else. I'll leave now." Chu Xiu said, "Why are you in such a hurry, Brother Yuqi? I've already asked someone to prepare food and wine." Yuqi shook his head and said, "There's always time to drink, but this time I didn't come to Guanxi just for Brother Chu's place. I also have to pay a visit to the Guanxi Punishment Hall branch to see Lord Wei Judwan." Chu Xiu nodded thoughtfully and sent Yuqi away. He seemed to have understood something. He had passed the test, but Wei Judwan's reputation would probably be ruined. On the second day after Yuqi left, Wei Hanshan appeared in the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He slowly stepped into the Inspector Hall. This time, Wei Hanshan's attitude was very fearless. Looking at Chu Xiu, Wei Hanshan sneered. "Chu Xiu, I said before that this matter is definitely not over. Now that your outrageous actions have even alarmed the headquarters, how long can you sit in your inspector position?" Chapter 169. Wei Hanshan's Shangzhou Prefecture was very close to Jianghu Prefecture. Moreover, Yuqi did not hide his tracks when he came to Guanxi. Wei Hanshan received the news almost as soon as Yuqi arrived at Jianghu Prefecture. When he learned that Yuqi had personally come to Jianghu Prefecture, Wei Hanshan immediately knew that his anonymous report had been successfully delivered to Lord Guan. Otherwise, Yuqi would not have personally come to see Chu Xiu. Squinting at Wei Hanshan, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "You are the one who secretly slandered me behind Lord Wei Judwan's back?" Wei Hanshan sneered, "What slander? I don't know anything, so don't accuse others. It's obviously your own misdeeds that caused such a big commotion. That's why the headquarters were alerted." Although he and Chu Xiu were the only two present, Du Guangzhong and the others had retreated because they didn't dare to interfere in the matters between the two Lord Patrol envoys. Wei Hanshan didn't dare to speak carelessly at this time. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If you don't want others to know, then don't do it." Wei Hanshan, "It's only the two of us now. Is there any meaning in putting on an act here? Besides, what are you here for?" Are you preparing to mock me? Wei Hanshan leisurely sat in front of Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "Of course I'm not that bored. I'm only here to discuss a deal with you." "What deal?" Wei Hanshan said, "Chu Xiu, the trouble you caused this time has already reached the main hall. Not only will you lose your position as inspector, you may even be punished by the torture chamber. Lord Guan has always been impartial. Even if you were recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Hero Chu Yuanqing, it is useless. I heard that you destroyed the Jiang family and obtained many things from them. You should know that if you didn't secretly cause trouble, the Jiang family was prepared to give me these things as a show of filial piety. So, if you're willing to be tactful and hand over all these things to me, I can still help you. Can you help me block the investigation from the higher-ups and keep my position?" Chu Xiu asked expressionlessly. Wei Hanshan sneered, "You're dreaming. Who can stop the people from the main hall? However, my Shangzhou prefecture is adjacent to your Jianzhou prefecture. If the main hall sends someone down to investigate, someone will definitely ask me. The only thing I can do to help you is not to add insult to injury. Otherwise, if I say a few bad things about you, you know the consequences. You might even be severely punished by the main hall." When Chu Xiu heard this, he immediately sneered and said, "Wei Hanshan, you should be the one dreaming. You reported me to Lord Guan, and now you covet the things I obtained from the Jiang clan. In the end, all the benefits are yours?" Wei Hanshan only sneered and did not say anything, but his meaning was very clear. That was, he already had Chu Xiu in his hands. Chu Xiu knocked on the table with his hand and said, "If I'm not wrong, you came here after seeing Yuqi leave. Based on Yuqi's speed, he has already set off for the Guanxi branch. When you return to the Shangzhou prefecture, you should receive news from Lord Wei. Wei Hanshan, you're not a fool, but you're an arrogant person. The Guanzhong torture hall has its own rules, and the Guanxi region also has its own rules. You should solve your own problems by yourself, but you insist on exposing the matter to the outside world, believing that you're infallible. I don't know if I will be removed from the position of patrol this time, but I do know that you will soon be out of luck." Wei Hanshan's expression changed slightly. He only knew that Yuqi had personally come to the Jianzhou prefecture, but he did not know what Yuqi had said to Chu Xiu. Seeing how calm Chu Xiu was, Wei Hanshan immediately felt that something was wrong. However, Wei Hanshan still said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you can be stubborn to the end. When the people above come down, you will be crying." With that, Wei Hanshan hurriedly left. He wanted to return to the Jianzhou prefecture to have someone scout out the situation. Seeing Wei Hanshan's departing figure, Chu Xiu could not help but reveal a cold glint in his eyes. His foundation in Guanzhong was still shallow, and it could be said that he had just established himself. Therefore, other than his own territory, Chu Xiu really did not plan to incur grudges with others. Unfortunately, even if he did not make things difficult for others, others still insisted on making things difficult for him. Since Wei Hanshan wanted to be his enemy, there would definitely be no lack of open and covert means in the future. After all, in Guanxi, Wei Hanshan's foundation, strength, and territory were all greater than Chu Xiu's. Of course, Wei Hanshan still had a problem to overcome, and that was Wei Juduan's anger. When Wei Hanshan returned to the Shangzhou prefecture, Yuqi also arrived at the Guanxi Punishment Hall branch. After seeing Wei Juduan, Yuqi smiled and cupped his hands. "Lord Wei, the Guanxi region hasn't been very peaceful recently. Someone has already reported this to Master. However, Master said that the Guanxi region's matters should be resolved by the Guanxi region itself. If Lord Wei can't resolve it, then the disciplinary hall headquarters will intervene." With that, Yuqi handed the secret letter to Wei Juduan. After reading the contents, Wei Juduan's expression immediately turned gloomy. "Don't worry, I will resolve this matter. I will not trouble Master Guan anymore, and this kind of thing will definitely not happen again in the future." Yuqi smiled. "That's good. I will go back and report to Master now." After Yuqi left, Wei Juduan angrily threw the dragon pattern iron ball in his hand to the ground, immediately blasting out a large pit several meters wide. "Get Wei Hanshan over here." Wei Judwan had no proof that this anonymous letter was written by Wei Hanshan. However, as the Guanxi Punishment Hall's disciplinary officer, did he need proof to deal with this kind of matter? Last time, he had accepted Chu Xiu's bribe, accepted Chu Xiu's loyalty, and stood on his side. In the blink of an eye, someone had reported this matter to the Punishment Hall headquarters. Who would believe that it was not Wei Hanshan who did it? Besides, even if this matter was really not Wei Hanshan's doing, it didn't matter. Wei Judwan just wanted to find someone to vent his anger on. Even if he found the wrong person, it was enough to give the other inspectors a warning. He wanted them to see the consequences of secretly playing dirty tricks. At this time, Wei Hanshan had just returned to the Shang Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He was about to send someone to inquire about the news when he heard his subordinate report that Wei Judwan wanted him to go to the Guanxi branch. When he heard this news, Wei Hanshan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He immediately went to the Guanxi branch. At this time, not only Wei Hanshan, but Chu Xiu and the other inspectors also received the news in advance and went to the Guanxi branch. In the Guanxi Torture Hall branch's meeting hall, Chu Xiu and the other inspectors were sitting in the hall. Wei Judwan sat in the main seat with a gloomy expression. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive. When Wei Hanshan stepped into the meeting hall and felt the atmosphere, he secretly cursed in his heart. The current scene was similar to when Wei Judwan had interrogated Chu Xiu, except that the person being interrogated was him. Wei Hanshan was about to say something when he heard Wei Judwan say in a chilly tone, "I had already made up my mind about the Jiang clan's extermination. If you were dissatisfied, you could have told me. But in the end, you went to the main hall to complain behind my back. Do you still have me, the punishment hall, in your eyes? Or is it that the vast Guanxi branch can no longer contain you?" Wei Hanshan hurriedly said, "Sir, you've wronged me. I really didn't do anything." Wei Judwan sneered, "Who else could it be if not you? Very well, tell me. Tell me and confront me in court." Wei Hanshan was about to say something, but he immediately swallowed his words. What was he supposed to say? None of the inspectors in the Guanxi branch were people to be trifled with. If he were to randomly accuse others, he would be courting death. Can't say it? Wei Judwan's expression turned cold, and a powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body. A faint golden gang qi condensed in the meeting hall and pressed down on Wei Hanshan with the weight of Mount Tai. The bluestone tiles on the ground cracked under this powerful pressure, and the cracks extended to Wei Hanshan's feet in a straight line. The powerful pressure immediately caused Wei Hanshan's face to turn red, and his body involuntarily fell to his knees with a thud. In fact, Wei Hanshan, a warrior who had condensed the 3 flowers above his head, could withstand the aura of an expert in the oneness of heaven and man realm. Back then, Chu Xiu had used the Duga seal of the 9 words formula to withstand the divine black spatial claw of the heavenly Sin branch leader. Now, even if Wei Hanshan did not have a defensive secret technique like the Duga seal, he could still withstand it. However, he did not dare to do so. Wei Judwan was currently in a fit of anger. The more he resisted, the more Wei Judwan would be enraged. Even Wei Hanshan himself did not understand why Wei Judwan was so sure that he was the one who did it without any evidence. Wei Judwan was even so angry and sensitive. Wei Judwan said coldly, "I know what you are thinking. You think that I am old and about to retire, so you no longer care about me and can do whatever you want. But in the Guanxi branch, as long as Lord Guan's order does not come, I will still be the penal officer of the Guanxi branch." When Wei Judwan said this, he not only exerted his powerful aura on Wei Hanshan, but also looked at the other inspectors, including Chu Xiu, who had just chosen to be loyal to him. On the surface, his actions seemed to be punishing Wei Hanshan, but he was secretly warning the other patrol envoys. He was telling them that as long as he was still the disciplinary officer, he would have the final say in the Guanxi region. "We dare not." Chu Xiu and the others stood up and bowed in unison. Wei Judwan only retracted his aura when he heard this. He said coldly, "You should know whether you dare or not, so I won't say more. Wei Hanshan, seeing that you have been with me for many years, I will not deprive you of your inspector position this time. However, I will punish you a little to prevent you from committing a serious crime. You are in charge of 2 prefectures, so from now on, the Chen province will be managed by Jiang Taoran. As soon as he said this, everyone present immediately looked at Jiang Taoran, who had been silent all this while, with astonished gazes. Chapter 170. To be able to become an inspector in the Guangzhou torture room, as long as they could hold this position for more than 10 years, they were basically not simple characters. Right now, Chu Xiu had this kind of feeling. If he could predict that Wei Hanshan would be unlucky this time, then others would naturally be able to as well. Moreover, Jiang Taoran was a step faster. He must have made some kind of deal with Wei Juduan first, which allowed him to snatch the Qinzhou prefecture from Wei Hanshan's hands. When Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan had a conflict, Jiang Taoran had pretended to be a peacemaker. In fact, he was just looking for an opportunity to profit from the conflict. Now, he had finally found this opportunity. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind it too much, because he had never thought of expanding his forces at all. He had just arrived and became an inspector at the physical invulnerability realm. This was already eye-catching enough. If he had 2 prefectures under his command, then he would become the target of public criticism. Wei Hanshan knelt on the ground and looked gloomily at the smiling and harmless Jiang Taoran. He also looked at Chu Xiu, who was sitting at the side and looking like he was watching the show. Wei Hanshan was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. Of course, he hated Wei Juduan even more in his heart. However, he did not dare to show this hatred. Wei Juduan snorted coldly and waved his hand. "All right, you can all leave. Remember, in the future, don't play any tricks." After saying this, Wei Juduan turned around and left. Chu Xiu looked at Wei Hanshan, who had just stood up with difficulty. He smiled faintly and said, "Lord Wei, I warned you before that you would soon be out of luck. Now, it seems that it has really come true, right?" Wei Hanshan did not get angry at this moment. He only looked at Chu Xiu with a cold gaze. "Very good. Chu Xiu, I have underestimated you before. You are able to enter the Longhu leaderboard at such a young age and compete with the young elites of the large sections. You are indeed not a simple person, be it in terms of strength or tactics. I was reckless this round and I lost. But don't forget what I said before. This matter is definitely not over." After he finished speaking, Wei Hanshan coldly glanced at Chu Xiu, then gave Jiang Taoran a deep look before turning around to leave. Chu Xiu also followed him out of the door without a care. The remaining 4 inspectors exchanged glances with each other. Their eyes were filled with confusion. In the future, they wouldn't have to look at Chu Xiu the same way they used to look at him. Although he was young, his methods and strength weren't immature. Even Wei Hanshan was played around with by him. He already had the qualifications to be on equal footing with them. After returning to the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall, Chu Xiu immediately began to cultivate in seclusion with peace of mind. It wasn't until now that his troubles were truly resolved. He had secured the position of inspector. In the outside world, Wei Hanshan had suffered a great loss, so he probably wouldn't be in the mood to cause trouble for him for the time being. After stepping into the physical invulnerability realm, other than a period of seclusion in the dense forest of Shangmang Mountain, Chu Xiu basically spent the rest of his time scheming against the group of people in the Guangzhou torture room. He didn't have much time to cultivate. There was a small bottleneck between the physical invulnerability realm and the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. Not only did it require accumulation, but it also required enlightenment. One's essence, qi, and spirit had to be unified to reach the peak and condense the 3 flowers above the head. Only then could one truly be considered to have reached the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. Although Chu Xiu's combat strength was very strong at the moment, and he could even fight with Wei Hanshan, who had already reached the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, Chu Xiu actually hadn't reached the threshold of this realm. The reason he was able to fight with Wei Hanshan was entirely because of his strong foundation and amazing explosive power. In terms of realms, if they were to fight to the extreme, Chu Xiu's foundation was actually still inferior to Wei Hanshan's. After all, there was a difference of 1 realm between the two, and it was a small realm like the three flowers at one's prominence, which could be considered a bottleneck. As for the Jiang clan's ancestor, who had been killed by Chu Xiu, he was on the brink of death and couldn't be taken out to be a battle achievement. Killing an old man on the brink of death wasn't something worth bragging about. A month later, in the middle of the night, while Chu Xiu was in seclusion in the inspector hall, a subtle movement suddenly came from the hall. This caused Chu Xiu, who was in seclusion, to suddenly open his eyes. He wasn't in seclusion for life and death. He was only accumulating his true qi and comprehending martial arts, so his perception was still there. When he heard that someone had sneaked into the inspector hall, Chu Xiu immediately frowned. It was true that the land of Guanzhong was a mix of good and bad people, but the Guanzhong torture room had absolute strength and prestige. Usually, some villains and thieves would avoid the Guanzhong torture room. At least, Chu Xiu had never heard of anyone daring to directly attack the Guanzhong torture room. Moreover, the strength of the Jianghu prefecture's inspector hall wasn't weak. There were dozens of constables guarding the place. Qin Fang and Lu Qingli weren't in the hall, but Du Guangzhong was. Now that this person was able to hide from the movements of so many people and sneak near him, it was obvious that he was not weak. Chu Xiu quietly pushed open the door of the seclusion room and quickly formed a seal with both hands. Formation formula, internal binding seal. Scamper the world, let me move freely. In an instant, Chu Xiu's speed exploded to the extreme. In an instant, he appeared in front of a black shadow. The red sleeve saber suddenly slashed out, and the biting cold blood refined divine gang fell with a ferocious crimson color. The speed was extremely fast. However, the black shadow's figure was even more elusive. Its speed was not much slower than Chu Xiu's internal binding seal. As the figure floated, it was like a willow leaf dancing in the wind, easily dodging Chu Xiu's saber. In an instant, more than 10 soul-chasing darts had appeared in front of Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu didn't even see how the person in front of him released the hidden weapons. The speed of the opponent's hidden weapons was not slower than Chu Xiu's Azure Dragon in the sleeve. Confrontation formula, Dugu's seal. In an instant, the earth energy around Chu Xiu condensed together, and he was as immovable as a mountain. When the soul-chasing darts hit Chu Xiu, they were directly blocked by his Dugu seal. As for the black shadow, in a flash, he directly leaped onto the roof and left the inspector hall. Looking at the soul-chasing darts on the ground, Chu Xiu immediately frowned. He felt that the hidden weapons seemed a little familiar. At this moment, the fluctuations from the fight between the two attracted Du Guangzhong and the others. Seeing that someone actually dared to sneak into the inspector hall of the Guangzhong torture room, Du Guangzhong's expression suddenly changed, and he directly said coldly, "Sir, this thief is extremely audacious. I will immediately lead the people to chase after him." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Don't chase after him for now. I will go on my own. You guys just wait here." With that said, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and he directly leaped onto the roof and disappeared. Following the traces of the black shadow, Chu Xiu directly came to a small alley not far from the inspector hall. The black shadow twisted a little and took off his hood. He was actually wearing an extremely dark suit, and only his eyes were exposed. His figure simply seemed to have blended into the night. "Brother Chu, long time no see. Perhaps I should call you Inspector Official Chu now." The black shadow's face carried a trace of a faint lazy smile. It was actually the former Blue Dragon Society assassin, Tanya. At this moment, an old man walked out from the small alley. It was the Ghostly Hand King. The Ghostly Hand King looked at Chu Xiu and said with a sigh, "As expected, people with ability don't have to worry about food and drink no matter where they go. In the Blue Dragon Society branch, you were a gold medal assassin, and now that you're in the Guangzhong torture room, you can actually sit in your inspector position so quickly." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. When he made his move before, he could roughly guess that the black shadow was Tanya. The other party's attainments in hidden weapons were very high. This was something Chu Xiu had already seen in the Blue Dragon Society, so he felt that the other party was a bit familiar. Seeing an old friend again, Chu Xiu said in a light voice, "The Heavenly Sin branch leader is quite persistent. He even chased me all the way to the Guanzhong torture room. But I don't believe that the Heavenly Sin Branch leader would dare make a move in the Guanzhong torture room. This isn't the Northern Yen or West Chu. The Guanzhong torture room is the only place in the Guanzhong Pass. The Blue Dragon Society doesn't even have a branch here. The ghostly hand king shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Don't mention the Blue Dragon Society. I'm no longer a member of the Blue Dragon Society, so the Heavenly Sin Branch leader probably doesn't have the time to chase you right now." Chu Xiu slightly knit his brows. He thought that the Heavenly Sin Branch leader had chased him all the way to the Guanzhong torture room and that Tanya was like last time, purposely leaking some information to warn him. Who would have thought that the ghostly hand king would say something like this? "Oh, what's going on?" Chu Xiu asked. The ghostly hand king didn't directly answer Chu Xiu. Instead, he said to the alley behind him, "All right, come out." As the ghostly hand king's voice fell, more than 30 people walked out from the depths of the alley. Among them were the cruel sword Yen Buge, the fire slave, and the wolf king that Chu Xiu was familiar with. The rest were the Xiantian realm assassins of the Heavenly Sin Branch. However, at this time, they weren't wearing the clothes of the Blue Dragon Society, nor were they wearing the bamboo hats and masks of the Blue Dragon Society. The ghostly hand king said to Chu Xiu, "As you can see, we are no longer members of the Blue Dragon Society. This is a long story, and I have to start from the time when the Heavenly Sin Branch leader failed to kill you. Back then, you lured the people of the White Tiger Hall to attack the Heavenly Sin Branch leader. The martial artists of the White Tiger Hall were very strong, and the Heavenly Sin Branch leader's foundation was even weaker than the other party. However, the brute of the White Tiger Hall was too confident, and the Heavenly Sin Branch leader used a strange treasure to ambush him. He was heavily injured, and in the end, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader was able to kill him. That brute of the White Tiger Hall was a branch leader under the White Tiger Hall, and his status was the same as the Heavenly Sin Branch leaders. As an old enemy, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader killed a branch leader of the White Tiger Hall, which was a great merit. Relying on this merit, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader actually obtained the opportunity to return to the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. Of course, only the Heavenly Sin Branch leader has the qualifications to return to the headquarters. We naturally don't have the qualifications. At this point, the corners of the Ghost Hand King's mouth revealed a trace of incomprehension. When the Heavenly Sin Branch leader left, he only took one person with him as a trusted aide. That person was the Azure Lightning Sword, Qin Jiao. Chapter 171. Chu Xiu was rather astonished that the Heavenly Sin Branch Lord was able to kill the Branch Lord of the White Tiger Hall. According to Chu Xiu's expectations, both sides should have been heavily injured, or the Heavenly Sin Branch leader would have retreated. He didn't expect that the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, who was at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation, would be able to kill the White Tiger Branch leader. Judging from the Ghost Hand King's tone, he seemed to be disdainful of the Heavenly Sin Branch leader's decision to bring Qin Jiao to the headquarters. However, Chu Xiu felt that it was normal. There were many capable people in the Heavenly Sin Branch leader. The Heavenly Sin Branch leader could casually pick someone to be his confidant, and they would all be stronger than Qin Jiao, who was good at bootlicking. However, although these people were strong, they really weren't suitable to be confidants. Yen Bugue was cold and unsociable, and Tanya's personality was hard to fathom. Moreover, when the Heavenly Sin Branch leader wanted to find someone to attract attention as a chess piece, he chose Chu Xiu and Tanya. Although the Heavenly Sin Branch leader chose Chu Xiu in the end, he also listed Tanya as one of his targets. Tanya's heart was probably already cracked. As for the Ghost Hand King and the others, they were either too slippery or not strong enough, so Qin Jiao was really a good choice. Of course, Qin Jiao was also good at bootlicking. Chu Xiu looked at the Ghost Hand King and the others and frowned. If the Heavenly Sin Branch leader went to the headquarters, then he went to the headquarters. Why did you guys leave the Blue Dragon Society? There's only one Heavenly Sin Branch in East Yen. Although the Heavenly Sin Branch leader is a little weak, he still managed to set up the framework of the Heavenly Sin Branch. The Blue Dragon Society wouldn't cripple the Heavenly Sin Branch just because they lost the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, right? The Ghost Hand King smiled bitterly. Of course, the Blue Dragon Society wouldn't cripple the Heavenly Sin Branch. Instead, the new branch leader brought a lot of killers with him, completely filling up the Heavenly Sin Branch. However, you should know the principle of a new ruler having a new set of officials. We are all veterans of the Sin Branch, and we are at a disadvantage in terms of numbers and strength. Without any backing, we will naturally be ostracized. You've seen the atmosphere when we were in the Heavenly Sin Division. There was almost no competition for missions. But now, even Tangya and Yenbu Gui can't get a single mission for a month. Under such circumstances, what's the point of us staying in the Heavenly Sin Branch? Even if we transfer to another branch, the situation will probably be the same. That's why I discussed it with Tangya and the others and decided to leave the Blue Dragon Society. These are the only brothers who are willing to leave with us. Chu Xiu suddenly asked. The price of leaving the Blue Dragon Society isn't low, right? The Blue Dragon Society was not a charity, but an assassin organization. It was easy to join, but hard to leave. For some other martial arts sects, if they wanted to leave the sect, they would either become abandoned disciples who were chased, or they would return their cultivation to the sect. It was rare to find someone who could leave the sect in one piece. This was the case for normal martial arts sects, not to mention the Azure Dragon Society, which was evil. The Ghost Hand King was silent for a moment before saying, "We are not considered important members of the Blue Dragon Society. Moreover, the new branch leader doesn't like us and wants to kick us out, so he didn't make things too difficult for us. But even so, we all took the initiative to swallow the goo worms and swore a heart demon oath not to reveal any information or secrets about the Blue Dragon Society. Furthermore, we had to fork out almost a third of our mission rewards over the years before the branch allowed us to leave safely." Hearing the Ghost Hand King say this, Chu Xiu was a little surprised. The price they paid was really not small. Not to mention 1/3 of all the mission rewards, the Ghost Hand King and the others had to bleed a lot. Also, the goo worms were strange existences from Miaojiang. After making a heart demon oath, as long as one violated the oath, the goo worms would devour their heart and kill them. It was very vicious. Unless the person who swallowed the goo worms could cultivate to the second realm of the 3 realms of spirit focus, the realm of true fire refinement, and use the true martial pill to evolve the true fire in their body, only then could they completely burn the goo worms. "Then why did you come to find me this time?" Chu Xiu seemed to have faintly guessed the reason why the Ghost Hand King and the others came to find him. Hearing Chu Xiu's question, the Ghost Hand King's expression turned serious, and he said, "We joined the Blue Dragon Society for many years. Now that we have left the Blue Dragon Society, we don't want to go to the underworld to mess around. We assassins from the Blue Dragon Society are absolutely top-notch when it comes to killing people. However, because we have to carry out missions all year round, we don't have much time to cultivate in seclusion, so our cultivation speed is a bit slow. This time, after leaving the Blue Dragon Society, all we want is a stable place to stay. Official Chu, you and we are old friends. In the past, even if we participated in the pursuit of you, it was because we had no other choice. We can also see Division Leader Heavenly Sin's character. To be honest, this time we actually came to seek shelter from you. We don't have the ability Official Chu, you can directly join the Guanzhong torture room and become patrol agents, so as long as you give us the status of some ordinary constable or bailiff, we will be satisfied. We are all acquaintances, I believe Official Chu understands our strength. We don't dare to say that we are stronger than the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room, but at least we won't be a burden to you." This was a decision that the Ghost Hand King and the others made after thinking for a long time after leaving the Blue Dragon Society. They were all elite assassins of the Blue Dragon Society. To be a bit arrogant, the Ghost Hand King and the others were a bit proud. After being assassins for so many years, they couldn't say that they were the best among warriors of the same rank, but at least there were few who could match them. Therefore, after leaving the Blue Dragon Society, they thought of many places to go, but either they didn't like people, or people didn't like them because of their background. As for going their separate ways and becoming rogue warriors in the pugilistic world, they weren't willing to do so casually. At this time, they occasionally heard some traveling merchants talking about the tragedy of the Jiang family in the Guangxi Jianzhou prefecture being annihilated. They were all condemning the new patrol agent Chu Xiu for his ruthlessness and tyranny, saying that the Jianzhou prefecture would have a hard time in the future, and so on. When the Ghost Hand King and the others heard this, they immediately went to ask around and found out that the new patrol agent Chu Xiu they were talking about was actually their former colleague from the Blue Dragon Society. When they first heard this news, the Ghost Hand King and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Even now, they still couldn't figure out Chu Xiu's identity. This guy went from an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society to a member of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army of Eastern Qi. The Ghost Hand King and the others thought that he had returned to Eastern Qi, but in the blink of an eye, he became the patrol agent of the Guangzhong torture room. What was going on? However, after understanding the power and status of the patrol agent, the Ghost Hand King had an idea, and that was to rely on Chu Xiu and join the Guangzhong torture room. This wasn't a whim of the Ghost Hand King, but a decision he made after thinking about it for a long time. If Chu Xiu was able to become a patrol agent in the Guangzhong Pass, it was naturally not a big deal for them, assassins from the Blue Dragon Society. Moreover, in terms of influence, the Guangzhong torture room was stronger than the Blue Dragon Society, so joining the Guangzhong torture room wasn't a disgrace to them. Most importantly, there was an acquaintance, Chu Xiu, in the Guangzhong torture room. When they were in the Blue Dragon Society, they had worked with Chu Xiu for a long time, so they understood Chu Xiu's character. His ability and strength were impeccable. Most importantly, Chu Xiu wasn't an extremely egoistic person like the Heavenly Sin Division leader. He could accept others, and joining Chu Xiu's service was better than following a superior like the Heavenly Sin Division leader. Therefore, when the Ghost Hand King told the others about this matter, it was immediately approved by most of them. For the Ghost Hand King, who was in the inner invulnerability realm, Chu Xiu's ability and strength were stronger than theirs. They had a clear understanding of this in the Blue Dragon Society. Even assassins like Fire Slave and Wolf King would follow Chu Xiu when they carried out their missions. Therefore, they didn't have any psychological burden or dissatisfaction when they became Chu Xiu's subordinates from colleagues. The ones who had some problems were Tanya and Yen Bugui. They were both in the physical invulnerability realm like Chu Xiu, and they were on the same level in the Blue Dragon Society. They were all 5th-level assassins. Would they be willing to be Chu Xiu's subordinates now? However, after the Ghost Hand King and the others agreed, Tanya and Yen Bugui didn't have any objections after thinking about it. They also agreed with the Ghost Hand King's suggestion. Yen Bugui's thinking was very simple. As long as he could kill people, he would be given cultivation resources. It didn't matter where he was. As for Tanya, even the Ghost Hand King couldn't guess what he was thinking. The Ghost Hand King solemnly cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu, to put it bluntly, this time we are here to seek refuge with you. If you agree, we will work together again and respect you as our master. If you don't agree, we won't continue to pester you because of our past relationship. We won't talk about the things you did in the Blue Dragon Society. The choice is in Official Chu's hands." The Ghost Hand King was a very tactful person. In the past, when he was in the Blue Dragon Society, he would call Chu Xiu by his name. Now that he had decided to seek refuge with Chu Xiu, he naturally had to correct his position. Addressing him as Lord already proved Ghost Hand King's current position and thoughts. Looking at these people from the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu revealed a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Since everyone thinks highly of me, Chu Xiu, and traveled thousands of miles to join me, I, Chu Xiu, naturally won't be unreasonable. In the past, we worked together in the Blue Dragon Society. You all know my personality and way of doing things. If you don't betray me, I won't betray you either. What you can obtain under me will definitely be more than what you obtained in the Blue Dragon Society." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, the Ghost Hand King and the others bowed in unison and said, "Greetings, Official Chu." At this time, even the eccentric and cold Yen Bugui cupped his hands. He didn't say anything, but this was enough to show his attitude. Chapter 172. The Ghost Hand King and the others had left the Blue Dragon Society and came to seek refuge with him. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for Chu Xiu. The Ghost Hand King and the others wanted to find a new place to settle down. Didn't Chu Xiu also need a group of powerful and reliable subordinates? To be honest, the people under Chu Xiu's current subordinates were just passable in terms of strength and reliability. Lu Qingli and Qin Fang's strength was barely passable, but they were both veterans in the Guanzhong torture room. They were rather slippery and liked to leave some leeway when doing things. Du Guangzhong was a bit better, but he was a bit inflexible and couldn't accomplish great things. The most important thing was that the three of them were threatened by Chu Xiu to join his subordinates. It was inevitable that they would have other thoughts in their hearts. Perhaps when Chu Xiu displayed absolute strength or when his own forces became stronger, these people would truly pledge their loyalty to Chu Xiu. But now, Chu Xiu didn't think that they would be of one mind with him. Moreover, Chu Xiu wasn't too satisfied with the strength of the other constables and bailiffs. Perhaps because he was used to dealing with the killers of the Blue Dragon Society, in Chu Xiu's mind, only the killers of the Blue Dragon Society could be considered as the true elites. The constables of the Guanzhong torture room were best at solving cases and deducing the information of the killers based on various traces. In terms of pure killing methods, they weren't as good as the killers of the Blue Dragon Society. The arrival of the Ghost Hand King and the others could be considered to have completely made up for the combat strength of Chu Xiu's subordinates. It could actually make the strength of Chu Xiu's subordinates skyrocket. Chu Xiu said to the Ghost Hand King and the others, "Find a place to stay today. Tomorrow morning, I'll send someone to pick you up and officially let you join the Guanzhong torture room." The strength of the Ghost Hand King and the others were in the innate, inner, and physical invulnerability realms. The positions that Chu Xiu could give them were only ordinary constables and bailiffs. Therefore, he had the right to appoint them without even needing Wei Juduan's consent. Tomorrow, he just needed to introduce the Ghost Hand King and the others to the Jianghu Inspector Hall, register their identities, and send them to the Guanxi Torture Hall for records and backup. In the end, Chu Xiu added, "All of you are considered to be newcomers. After you join the Jian Province's Inspector Hall tomorrow, it will be very easy for you to encounter some problems. When the time comes, you might need to display your strength." The Ghost Hand King smiled, "We know the rules. Not only in the Guanzhong torture room, but also in Jianzhou Inspector Master. Who would take you seriously if you were new here and had no strength?" This kind of thing happened to Chu Xiu when he first joined the Blue Dragon Society. Now it was their turn. On the morning of the second day, the entire patrol hall was discussing the matter of someone sneaking into the hall that night. However, before they could discuss further, Du Guangzhong and the others received news that a few of the pugilistic world's constables were to make a trip to the meeting hall. Chu Xiu had something to tell them. When Du Guangzhong and the others arrived at the conference hall, they were surprised to find that there were already 5 people sitting in the conference hall. There were both inner and physical invulnerability experts. Chu Xiu introduced, "These are my good friends from the Blue Dragon Society." Because of the internal strife of the Blue Dragon Society, they chose to leave the Blue Dragon Society. Now that they have nowhere to go, they are also preparing to join the Guanzhong torture room and appoint them as constables of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. There are also more than 30 other people who will also join the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. Chu Xiu pointed at Du Guangzhong and the other 2 and said, "These 3 are the veteran constables of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. Du Guangzhong, Lu Qingli, and Qin Fang, we will be colleagues from now on. Now that we know each other, it will be easier for us to cooperate in the future." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, Du Guangzhong and the other 2 showed vigilance and resistance in their eyes. It was a good thing that the Jianzhou Inspector Hall became more powerful, but the sudden appearance of so many experts was not necessarily a good thing for them. Currently, they were in charge of most of the matters of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall, but now that so many people suddenly appeared, would they seize their authority? They naturally could not stop Chu Xiu from appointing anyone as constables of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall, but it did not mean that they would not express their opinions on this matter. Smiling, Lu Qingli said, "Since you're all friends of Exalted Chu, and you're all from the Azure Dragon Society, I'm sure you're all very strong. With your addition, the power of the Jianghu Inspector Hall will definitely increase greatly. This cup of tea is for you all, and I hope that you will take care of me in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Qingli suddenly swung his hand and made a gesture of offering tea. However, the earth energy in his body suddenly exploded in his hands, and the teacup directly flew out of his hand, blasting towards the Ghost Hand King and the others. As the teacup approached, the lid suddenly opened, and the tea wrapped in earth energy shot towards the Ghost Hand King and the others like a sharp arrow. Tanya took a step forward and waved with one hand. The speed was so fast that one could not even see the trajectory, but wisps of earth energy wrapped around the tea without leaving a trace, like a net, and sent the tea back into the teacup. Tanya took the teacup with ease and took a sip of tea, then said with a smile, "Thank you, Lord Lu. Actually, we should be the ones who need to take care of you." Seeing Tanya's casual action, Lu Qingli's expression suddenly became solemn. In front of Chu Xiu, he did not dare to go too far, so just now he was just testing the other party. He wanted to let the tea splash on the other party and make him look a little embarrassed. However, who would have thought that the other party would show such control of earth energy that even he was shocked? Although this degree of control of earth energy did not represent one's own strength, it also proved that the person in front of him was absolutely extraordinary. And at this time, Yen Bugei, who had been silent all this time, took off the huge sword on his back and casually placed it on the ground. This seemingly casual placing of the sword caused the ground to shake, as if there was an earthquake, but there was not the slightest crack on the ground. This move caused the expressions of Du Guangzhong and the others to change slightly. This move was even more direct than the control of earth energy that Tanya had shown just now. What Yen Bugui had shown was the control of strength. It was easy to lift something heavy as if it was light, but it was difficult to lift something light as if it was heavy. Yen Bugui's control of strength had already reached the point where he could control the weight of his strength freely. He could cause the earth to shake without damaging the ground. Now, if his sword were to slash at a piece of tofu, the tofu would not be damaged in the slightest, and the stone slabs or even iron slabs would shatter the tofu. Lu Qingli and the others looked at each other and did not say anything. At this point, there was no longer a need to probe. As expected of an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society. Not to mention anything else, his strength was indeed the best among warriors of the same level, and this also gave them some pressure. In the past, they were the only ones under Chu Xiu. Although it could not be said that they were slacking, at least they did not feel any pressure because other than them, Chu Xiu also had no one else he could use. But now, these people from the Blue Dragon Society had come, and they were even old acquaintances of Chu Xiu. They were no longer the only ones. Looking at the people on both sides below, Chu Xiu did not directly state his position. It was good for his subordinates to have disagreements and competition, but it was taboo to be in harmony or a pool of stagnant water. Of course, he would not be as stupid as the Heaven Sin branch leader, who would deliberately provoke his subordinates and deliberately divide them. That was purely looking for death. Looking at the people below, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "All right, stop probing each other. Because the Ghost Hand King and the others have just arrived, they will not directly manage the affairs of the patrol hall. They are not familiar with it, and they do not understand it. Therefore, I will be in charge of it for the time being." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Du Guangzhong and the others let out a long sigh of relief. However, Chu Xiu continued, "It is just that the people under me, Chu Xiu, do not look at qualifications, only strength. Right now, the power of my Jianghu Prefecture's patrol hall has greatly increased, and the demand has also greatly increased. It is time to do something. Whether it is the cultivation resources or the power in my hands, I will not directly give them to you. Instead, you will have to fight for them yourselves. Whoever has the ability will be promoted. It is simple, direct, and fair. Isn't that right?" Du Guangzhong and the others immediately stood up and cupped their hands, saying, "Yes, sir." As long as Chu Xiu did not show favoritism and directly competed with the people of the Blue Dragon Society, they were not afraid. The killers of the Blue Dragon Society were indeed the elites of the elites, but the martial artists of the Guangzhong torture room were not bad either. Moreover, this was the Guanzhong torture room. These people from the Blue Dragon Society had just arrived, so they were definitely not as familiar with the place. In this place, killing people was not the only thing that could solve everything. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Old Du, bring some people to the Jianghu prefecture and send invitations to all the local martial arts forces. 3 days later at noon, I will invite them to a banquet in the Jianghu prefecture's Phoenix Cry restaurant. Let the masters of each force come in person. Of course, it is fine if they do not come, but let them imagine the consequences themselves." Du Guangzhong and the others nodded when they heard this. They had already expected this. The Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall had already established its prestige in the Jianghu Prefecture, and this prestige was built on the premise that the Jiang family was exterminated. Normally, after the Jiang family was exterminated, these local martial arts forces should have come to visit the Jianghu Prefecture. However, because Chu Xiu was a little too aggressive in the Jiang family's extermination, these sects and aristocratic families were a little conflicted, so they did not come. Since they did not come, Chu Xiu could only take the initiative to take action. Right now, Chu Xiu had already been in seclusion for a month. He seemed to be very low-key, but in fact he was just sharpening his knife. Now, the blade had been sharpened to a very sharp point. Moreover, he had managed to catch up with Ghost Hand King and the others who had come to seek shelter. This was a pleasant surprise for Chu Xiu. The strength of his subordinates had skyrocketed, and it was time to use the blade. Following Chu Xiu's order, Du Guangzhong immediately asked his constables to send the news to the major sects and aristocratic families. However, after these sects and aristocratic families received the news, they did not immediately decide whether to go or not. Instead, they first gathered together and secretly contacted each other to gather information. Chapter 173. There were more than 10 small cities in Jianghu Prefecture, and there were dozens of martial arts forces among them. However, those that could stand on the stage had at least a physical invulnerability realm martial artist in charge. There were about 12 or 3 such martial arts forces, and their strength was not too weak. In the past, the Guanzhong torture room was weak, but it did not mean that the local martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture were weak. The Jiang family was one of the top martial forces in Jianghu Prefecture, but they were destroyed by Chu Xiu without hesitation some time ago. This made the other martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture angry but also a little afraid. They could not help but recall some memories hidden in the bottom of their hearts. In the past, when Guan Xiu had just taken over the Guanzhong torture room, outsiders said that he was impartial and merciless. He even crippled and killed his own disciples. However, it was important to note that this was only how Guan Xiu treated his own people. He was already so harsh to his own people, so how could he show mercy to outsiders? In the past, when Guan Xiu had just taken over the Guanzhong Punishment Hall, she had killed many people and destroyed many sects in order to stabilize the order of the Guanzhong Punishment Hall. She only stopped when everyone was killed to the point that they no longer dared to violate the rules of the Guanzhong Punishment Hall. Chu Xiu's cruel methods of doing things were somewhat similar to Guan Xiu's in the past. In the Luo family of Luoqing, the heads of the 12 major forces in Jianghu Prefecture were all gathered here. The Luo family was a big family of the same level as the Jiang family in the past. The Jiang family was known as Jiang Banqing in Qi City, and the Luo family was in Luoqing. Even Luoqing was built because of the existence of the Luo family. At this time, in a secret room in the Luo family, people from the 12 major forces in Jianghu Prefecture were all present. The Luo family's great ancestor also had the cultivation of the 3-flower realm. Although he looked old, he was not as old as the Jiang family's great ancestor. The power of the Luo family was also in the hands of the Luo family's great ancestor. At this time, there were 12 people in the meeting hall. In the end, these 12 people were either sitting there with their eyes fixed on their noses and mouths, not saying a word, or they were drinking tea as if the Luo family's tea was some kind of delicacy. The Luo family patriarch wore a black brocade robe with cloud patterns. Although his hair was a little white, it was neat and tidy. Seeing everyone's reaction, the Luo family's ancestor couldn't help but frown. I say, everyone, it was you who suggested to find a place to discuss this matter. In the end, my Luo family has provided such an opportunity and a place, but in the end, none of you said anything. What is the meaning of this? When they heard the Luo clan's ancestor, all of them started to discuss in low voices. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man who was dressed like a scholar stood up and cupped his hands. Everyone, all of you've seen Chu Xiu's way of doing things. He's vicious, merciless, and doesn't give anyone any face. He's completely ruthless and doesn't care about rules or reason at all. Not to mention the Jiang clan, we have also done such a thing. Everyone, don't be in a hurry to shirk responsibility. Who dares to say that none of you have violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture hall? If Chu Xiu treats the Jiang family like this, then there's no need to mention how he treats us. Therefore, this time, when Chu Xiu invited us to the banquet, it's most likely not a good banquet. The scholar who spoke was the sect leader of the Jianghu Prefecture's Divine Feathers sect, Soaring Feather Falcon, Qing Gongtai. He was most proficient in speed-type movement techniques and had a cultivation of the physical invulnerability realm. Hearing Qing Gongtai's words, a rough-looking man dressed in black scratched his head and said, "Old Cheng's words make sense. This Chu Xiu doesn't have any good intentions at all. Look at the time he invited us to the banquet. It's exactly noon. Who would choose such an inauspicious time to invite us? What is he trying to do? Execute us at noon?" This black-robed man, Do Weihu, was the hall leader of the Haiyan Hall in the Jianghu Prefecture. He was born in the wilderness and eventually established the Haiyan Hall. His history was short, only slightly more than 10 years. However, he was very strong. Although he was only at the physical invulnerability realm, his physical cultivation was extremely terrifying. After hearing Do Weihu's words, someone else chimed in, "That's right. After this Chu Xiu annihilated the Jiang family, he didn't wait for us to pay our respects. This time, he's probably going to take action personally. When that time comes, we don't even know whether we'll be greeted with swords or wine." Following these two people's words, the crowd began to discuss again. It was much livelier than before. However, this time, the crowd seemed more like they were chatting and bragging. After talking for a long time, no one could come up with a concrete plan. Looking at this chaotic scene, the Luo family patriarch shouted in a low voice, "All of you, shut up." Everyone gathered together to come up with ideas, not to chat. Right now, all the sects in the Jianghu Prefecture are under the pressure of Lord Chu Xiu. This time, what kind of attitude should we use to face Lord Chu Xiu? In fact, should we go or not go? Everyone, please come up with a plan. Everyone looked at each other, then at each other, but no one said a word. In the end, Do Weihu from the Haiyan Hall sneered and said, "You guys are too cowardly. What's there to discuss about this? Since the other party is planning a Hongmen banquet, why don't we just not go? No matter how domineering Chu Xiu is, he can't attack us just because we don't go to the banquet. It's true that a martial arts faction can't stop the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall. However, what if all the martial arts factions in the Jianghu Prefecture unite together? I don't believe that Chu Xiu would dare to force us all to rebel." The people from the martial arts factions all nodded. What Do Weihu said made sense. Guanzhong was not the chaotic land of the past. Now, there were still rules. Chu Xiu could be domineering, but he could not run amok. If he dared to force all the martial arts factions in the Jianghu Prefecture to rebel, this matter would definitely alarm the headquarters. At that time, Chu Xiu would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. This matter was no longer something that Wei Juduan could suppress. However, after discussing for a long time, they still could not come to a conclusion. In the end, they could not even come to a conclusion on whether they should accept Chu Xiu's invitation to attend the banquet 3 days later. In the end, everyone could only leave with their own thoughts. After everyone left, the Luo family patriarch rubbed his eyebrows tiredly. A few martial artists from the core generation of the Luo family walked out. One of them asked, "Patriarch, have you come to a conclusion?" The Luo family patriarch snorted coldly when he heard that and said, "Come to a fart." Even at this point, this bunch of idiots still have their own plans. Everyone has their own schemes in their hearts. Without a knife to their necks, it's impossible to join forces. If my Luo family really joins forces with this bunch of idiots, I'm afraid we'll die even faster. Then, are we going out on Chu Xiu's invitation this time? The martial artist asked. The Luo family patriarch said indifferently, "Of course we're going." Why not? The shot shoots the bird that sticks out. The Jiang family has already taken care of this bird that sticks out. My Luo family naturally can't be the second. Let's see. When the time comes, we just need to see this Chu Xiu's attitude and act according to the crowd. In the past, the Jiang family hooked up with Wei Juduan and developed their business and family's strength wantonly. They even faintly had the reputation of being the #1 family in the Jianghu prefecture. Back then, you were still envious and prepared to learn from the Jiang family. In the end, what about now? Do you still want to learn from the Jiang family? Remember, it's not that easy to be first, and it's the same for the second. So, our Luo family doesn't seek to be first or second. We just want to be third or fourth. That way we can live longer. The martial artists of the Luo family all nodded. At the moment, the power of the Luo family was still in the hands of the Luo family patriarch. As long as the patriarch said something, regardless of whether they understood it or not, they just needed to remember it. 3 days later, in the Phoenix restaurant, Chu Xiu directly booked the largest restaurant in the Jianghu city, the Phoenix restaurant. The banquet was held on the 6th floor of the Phoenix restaurant. The Guangzhou area was located in the center of the 3 countries, so the food also had the style of the 3 countries. As the inspector of the Jianghu prefecture, Chu Xiu also had the backing of a small local force in the Jianghu city. This time, in order to please Chu Xiu, they also put in a lot of effort and put in all kinds of delicacies. Chu Xiu had arrived at the main seat a long time ago. There were 12 seats below him. It was not even noon yet, but people from various martial arts factions had arrived one after another. Those who arrived first were the weaker martial arts forces. They didn't think too much about it, purely because they didn't want to offend Chu Xiu. The Luo family patriarch was the 4th to enter. Although he had the cultivation of the 3-flower realm at one's prominence, he still took the initiative to greet Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu is indeed worthy of being a young talent on the Longhu list. As expected, you are outstanding, young and promising." The Luo family patriarch was old friends with the Jiang family patriarch in the past. They had worked together and fought each other, so he had a good understanding of the Jiang family patriarch's strength. Now, he was so polite to Chu Xiu not only because of Chu Xiu's status, but also because Chu Xiu had the strength to kill the Jiang family patriarch. Based on this alone, they were on equal footing. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Old Master Luo, you're too polite. You're a senior in the martial arts world, so please take care of me in the future." The Luo family patriarch chuckled and said, Sure. I believe that the Jianghu prefecture will be even more glorious under the leadership of official Chu in the future." As the two of them pretentiously flattered each other, many people from other martial arts forces also arrived one after another. Chen Gongtai of the Divine Feather sect, who previously said that Chu Xiu was up to no good, came, and so did Do Weihu of the Haiyan Hall. Seeing Do Weihu walk in, the rest of the people cursed in their hearts. This boor looked rough, but in reality he was the most scheming. Back when they were at the Luo family patriarch, Do Weihu said that Chu Xiu's banquet was a trap and that he wouldn't come. In the end, didn't he come obediently? If there was really an idiot who listened to Do Weihu and didn't come, then that person would really stand out. At that time, he would probably become Chu Xiu's primary target. Chapter 174. There were a total of 12 martial arts factions that were invited by Chu Xiu. They were pretty much all the martial arts factions in the entire Jianghu prefecture. However, at this time, the 12 seats were not filled. One person did not come. Everyone present had a strange expression on their faces. The person who did not come was from the Gao family of Wen City. He was not considered strong and could only be ranked last among the martial arts factions in the Jianghu prefecture. They did not expect that the Gao family would be so unyielding. Faced with Chu Xiu's invitation, he actually did not come. Chu Xiu's expression did not change in the slightest. After noon, when the person still did not arrive, Chu Xiu said directly, "Remove the seat." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, a small constable immediately walked over and removed the seat. Looking at everyone present, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Since I took over the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall, this is the first time I have met all of you face to face. Therefore, I would like to propose a toast to all of you." Just as Chu Xiu picked up his wine cup, a middle-aged martial artist wearing a blue brocade robe suddenly walked in from outside. He had physical invulnerability realm cultivation. The moment he came in, he smiled and said, "My apologies, Official Chu. Maiwan City is a little far from Jianghu City, so I am late. Please forgive me, Official Chu." Chu Xiu put down his cup and sized up the Gao family master. He said calmly, "Late? All right then, find a place to sit." The Gao family master hurriedly wanted to take a seat, but he was shocked to find that there was no seat for him at the table. He could not help but smile awkwardly and said, "Official Chu, there is no seat left." Chu Xiu's expression instantly darkened. He said coldly, "Since you know there is no seat for you, then why are you still not getting out?" The Gao family master's expression changed. "Official Chu, what do you mean by this? I only came a little late. Are you not going to give me face? You're even more arrogant than Lord Disciplinary Officer." Chu Xiu said coldly, "I don't like people who are late. I've already given you enough face by personally inviting you to the banquet. Now that you're late, you've thrown away this face yourself. You can't even come to my banquet late, which proves that you don't take me, Chu Xiu, seriously. I give you face, but you don't want a seat? Get out of here." Chu Xiu's words made the face of the Gao family's patriarch flush red. No matter what, he was still the head of a family and was ranked among the many martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture. But now, he was humiliated by Chu Xiu in front of everyone. How could he get out of this embarrassing situation? Therefore, the Gao family head pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Chu Xiu, don't go too far. You should know." However, before he could finish speaking, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and in the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in front of the Gao family's patriarch. His hand formed a fist seal, the army formula, the Great Vajra Wheel seal. Slaying evil and subduing demons, unstoppable. Golden Gang Qi shone in the meeting hall. No one present expected Chu Xiu to suddenly make a move. Even the Gao family head himself did not expect it. When this incomparably majestic seal appeared in front of him, the Gao family head struck out with his palm. Gang Qi erupted, wanting to block it. Although Chu Xiu had not reached the peak of the physical invulnerability realm, his strength was already enough to crush martial artists of the same level. Among martial artists of the same level, only the direct disciples of a powerhouse like Yuqi or Tangya, who was also from the Blue Dragon Society and had extremely strong combat strength, could fight him. However, the Gao family head in front of him had obviously not reached this level. His strength was even inferior to Du Guangzhong and other Jianghu detectives. The power of the fast and slow 9 words formula was extremely powerful. As the fiercest and most overbearing style of the 9 words formula, the Great Vajra Wheel seal was not something that the Gao family head could easily resist. When Chu Xiu's seal fell, the Golden Gang Qi exploded in an instant, enveloping the Gao family head. After a fierce explosion of Gang Qi, everyone could clearly hear the sound of bones cracking. The Gao family head's arms were twisted like fried dough twists. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was directly sent flying. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Seeing Chu Xiu's move, everyone present immediately held their breath and did not make a sound. Even the great ancestor of the Luo family and the other 2 martial artists of the 3-flower realm at once prominence did not speak. They had long since heard of Chu Xiu's battle prowess. However, now that they had seen Chu Xiu cripple a cultivator of the same cultivation level as him with a single move and beat him to the point where it was unknown whether he was dead or alive, such terrifying battle prowess still shocked them. Moreover, this time, it was the Gao family head who had a death wish. No one could say anything about Chu Xiu teaching him a lesson, so naturally, no one stood up for him. When city was far from the Jianghu prefecture, but it was not so far that it would take 3 days to get there. Not to mention riding a horse, they could walk there. The Gao family head might have really planned not to come, but they were still worried. So, they arrived in Jianghu city in advance and waited at the entrance of the restaurant, wanting to see who was not coming. If an expert like the great ancestor of the Luo family did not come, then he would directly leave. Therefore, the Gao family head had been waiting at the entrance the whole time. At the end of the wait, he realized that everyone had already arrived. It turned out that his action was not because he was clever, but because he was really stupid. Thinking of this, the Gao family head hurriedly wanted to come in, but it was already too late. Chu Xiu had directly removed him from his position. There was only one chance, and Chu Xiu would only give face once. The Gao family head did not grasp the opportunity, so he could not blame anyone else. Throw this idiot out. Don't disturb everyone's drinking mood. After Chu Xiu gave the order, someone immediately carried the half-dead Gao family head away. Chu Xiu stretched out his hand, and the Ghost Hand King personally handed a white towel to Chu Xiu. Turning around, Chu Xiu wiped the blood on his hand and revealed a smile, saying, "Everyone, let's continue the conversation. Don't let the disturbance of an idiot spoil our mood." Picking up the wine cup, Chu Xiu said, "As I said, this cup of wine is to everyone." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu drank the wine in his cup. The others did the same. With the previous example, no one dared to not give face to Chu Xiu now. Then Chu Xiu continued, "This second cup of wine is to the Guanzhong torture room. Guanzhong is located between 3 countries. Everyone can look at the history. Throughout history, which place like this has not been extremely miserable, covered in the flames of war all day long? The Guanzhong torture room's contributions cannot go unnoticed for all of you to be able to live so comfortably now. Therefore, this second cup is to the Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiu had spoken in such a dignified manner, so everyone did not say anything. They all drank a cup of wine in unison. Pouring the wine in front of them to the brim, Chu Xiu said, "As for the third cup, there's no hurry to drink it. It won't be too late to drink it after the discussion." Everyone present looked at each other. The main show had finally come. What exactly Chu Xiu wanted to do would be revealed now. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Guanzhong area is connected to 3 countries. Although the punishment hall does not allow smuggling, I believe that everyone here has done it many times. You must have earned a lot, right?" The expressions of everyone present immediately changed. This was the unspoken rule of the Guanzhong area. In the Guanzhong area, which martial arts faction had done this kind of thing openly or secretly? The only difference was that some people did it more and some people did it less. But no matter how many, it was somewhat inappropriate to say such things in broad daylight. Therefore, just as everyone wanted to say something, they were stopped by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Everyone, we are all on the same side now, so there is no need to be secretive. I, Chu Xiu, am different from the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan. I am actually very easy to talk to. Only by making things convenient for others can it be convenient for myself. In this world, power, fame, beauty, or wealth is what everyone strives for. It's not shameful to follow one's heart's desires and desires. The martial arts world in Guanzhong had never been orthodox, but it was not evil either. Now that Chu Xiu had said it so openly, they were still not used to it. Chu Xiu continued, "Right now, all the smuggling businesses in Jianghu Prefecture are controlled by you, so what you have is wealth. As the inspector of Jianghu Prefecture, what I have is power. With the two combined, we will definitely be able to obtain more than what we have now. Therefore, this third cup of wine is a toast to the cooperation with all of you. After drinking this cup of wine, we will all be friends. We will get rich together, and we will focus on money together." Chu Xiu slammed the wine cup on the table and looked around at everyone present. Everyone's expression changed slightly, and they looked at each other. The Luo clan patriarch coughed and asked, "I wonder what kind of cooperation official Chu is talking about?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "It's very simple. Right now, in my opinion, your smuggling businesses are basically a mess. Everyone is doing their own thing, sneaking around, and there is no order to speak of. If we are to cooperate, we will have to replan our respective businesses. For example, the Luo clan will only deal in minerals, the Divine Feathers sect will deal in elixirs, and the Haiyan Hall will deal in weapons. Each party will control a business in order to avoid conflict with each other and directly monopolize it. They will lower the purchasing price and raise the selling price. As long as the other party wants to do business in Jianghu Prefecture, they will have to follow the rules here. In this way, won't your profits increase?" As soon as he said this, everyone's eyes lit up. Smuggling could be done in such a way? Right now, the smuggling business in Jianghu Prefecture was indeed as Chu Xiu had said. It was quite chaotic on the whole. Everyone was doing their own thing, and there were many conflicts between them. Why were the 12 martial arts factions not united? It was because there were many conflicts of interest between them, and they often fought or even killed each other to form a grudge. If they did as Chu Xiu said, everyone would work together and monopolize their own businesses. This could indeed prevent such a situation from happening, and this method would also have great benefits both internally and externally. Chapter 175. The secret smuggling business in Jianghu was no different from other places in Guangzhou. It was a mess both internally and externally. If they worked together, they could lower the purchase price and then raise the selling price, just like Chu Xiu had said. At present, most of the caravans from the 3 countries in Guangzhou had rushed to Guangzhou and sold the contraband they carried to the local gangsters for them to hide. In this way, they could avoid being discovered by the people in the Guangzhou torture room. In the past, these smuggled contraband did not have a fixed price. The foreign merchants would quote a price, and the local martial arts forces would buy it. If the price was too low, the foreign merchants would just go to other forces. Similarly, these martial arts forces could also sell some smuggled contraband goods to other places after purchasing them. The price could not be too expensive, otherwise, people could just look for other aristocratic families. In any case, there were more than 10 martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture. If they did as Chu Xiu said, they could lower the price to the extreme and raise it to the extreme. At that time, their income could really double. Of course, no matter if they lowered or raised it, it could not be too exaggerated. Otherwise, the foreign merchants were not idiots. At worst, they could just leave for a while and go to other prefectures to trade. At this time, everyone present was thinking about how many times their income could be multiplied if they did as Chu Xiu said. Only the Luo family's patriarch asked first, "Official Chu, we have seen the benefits you mentioned. What do you want from us by doing this?" Chu Xiu glanced at the Luo family's patriarch and said slowly, "I said, now I have the power, and you have the money. What I want is naturally money. As a warrior, all kinds of cultivation resources are bought with money. Also, it's time for my brothers in the Jianghu Prefecture's inspector to start eating. After you and I cooperate, I will send people into your families. They will not interfere with your business, only your income. From then on, 20% of your income will be mine." As soon as he said that, the crowd burst into an uproar. They looked at Chu Xiu as if they had seen a ghost. Previously, they had heard that Chu Xiu was extremely greedy when dealing with the Jiang clan. It could be said that he was an exorbitant person, asking for 1/10 of the Jiang clan's assets. Now that they saw it, Chu Xiu's appetite was really big. This time, he didn't ask for the family's assets, but directly asked for 20% of their business. The family property was given to them in a lump sum, but the 20% of the business income had to be exploited. How could they tolerate this? The Heavenly Feather Sect's Qing Gongtai immediately stood up and said, "Official Chu, you want 20% of our business right off the bat. But just based on that idea of yours, isn't this a little too much?" Chu Xiu spun the wine glass in his hand and said faintly, That idea was just a gift from me. The more money you guys earn, the more I'll earn. As for why I want 20% of your income, I've already made it very clear before. You guys have the money, but I have the power. As Chu Xiu raised his head and looked at Qing Gongtai, a cold and gloomy aura blew over, causing Qing Gongtai to shiver. Don't forget what kind of place this is. There are some businesses that you can only do if I let you do it. If I don't let you do it, you won't even get a single copper coin. Everyone looked at Chu Xiu. It was only now that they had witnessed Chu Xiu's tyranny. On the surface, it was a cooperation between the two parties, with Chu Xiu taking 20% of the income. However, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, they finally understood that the so-called 20% of the income was simply a protection fee. If they handed over 20% of the income, they could openly carry out the smuggling business in the Jianghu prefecture and form a monopoly. Chu Xiu, the patrol inspector, would protect them. However, if they didn't hand over the income, the Jiang family's fate was already in front of everyone. They would be directly charged with a crime, and without any evidence, they would be directly destroyed. Chu Xiu looked at the people in front of him, raised the wine glass in his hand, and said faintly, "This glass of wine is a toast to all of you. Drink it, and our cooperation will be considered to have begun. You can choose for yourselves." Everyone present looked at each other, but no one raised their glasses. 20% of the income sounded simple, but it was like cutting off their own flesh. Who wouldn't feel the pain of cutting off their own flesh? Moreover, this piece of flesh would be cut off for a lifetime. Although the income described by Chu Xiu seemed to be very attractive, who would be willing to cut off their own flesh like this before seeing a certain amount of income? Moreover, although the destruction of the Jiang family last time had shocked them, now that more than a dozen of them were together, their power was not something that the Jiang family could compare to. Chu Xiu could annihilate the Jiang clan, but could he annihilate all of them? Most importantly, at present, if most of them agreed, even if the others felt the pain, they could only follow suit. However, now that everyone was silent, who would be the first to raise their glass in agreement? Wouldn't that be the idiot who took the initiative to cut off their own flesh? Therefore, until now, no one spoke. After a long while, Chu Xiu put down his glass and said faintly, "It seems that I, Chu Xiu, am still not respected enough. Even when I took the initiative to propose a toast, no one actually drank it. However, it doesn't matter. I believe that one day, everyone will drink this glass of wine. Everyone, you can leave now." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, everyone present immediately heaved a sigh of relief. They knew that with more than a dozen of them gathered together, Chu Xiu couldn't touch them, nor did he have the strength to do so. The group of people directly left after saying a few pleasantries. In an instant, the huge restaurant became a little empty. Seeing this, Du Guangzhong walked to Chu Xiu's side and said with some hesitation, "My lord." Chu Xiu raised his hand and interrupted Du Guangzhong's words. He picked up his glass and drank the wine in it in one gulp. A cold light appeared in his eyes as he said, "Since you refuse a toast, you will drink a forfeit." Majesty was always more memorable than Shinis, and this was the case no matter where it was. Most people only learn to eat and not to be beaten. Only when they were beaten to the point of pain and fear would they learn. It was not that they were stupid, nor was it that they were greedy. It was human nature. In this martial world, there were always very few people who could really see themselves clearly. "Old Du, I heard that someone in these forces said bad things about me?" Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Du Guangzhong nodded and said, "Yes, someone said that they slandered you and did not have good intentions this time. They wanted to contact the martial world forces in the Jianghu prefecture to boycott you. The one who said it was the sect master of the Divine Feathers sect, Soaring Feather Falcon, Qing Gongtai, and the hall master of the Black Cliff Hall, Horizontal Refined Golden Body, Do Weihu. My informant found out from the Luo clan subordinates. It's definitely true." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said to Du Guangzhong, "Go tell Qin Fang and Lu Qingli to gather their trusted subordinates. Remember, as long as they are elite trusted subordinates, the weakest must be an innate." Turning his head, Chu Xiu said to Ghost Hand King, "Ghost Hand King, the same for your people. Gather all of them and be ready to wait for orders." After joining the Guanzhong torture room, Ghost Hand King and the others did not have a specific scope of authority. They could only follow by Chu Xiu's side and wait for orders. Moreover, the person in charge of them was also Ghost Hand King. Yen Bugui was not good at managing these things, while Tanya found it troublesome and did not care about these small powers. Therefore, these things were still managed by Ghost Hand King. Anyway, he was not weak. Most importantly, he was the most prestigious among the assassins from the Blue Dragon Society. He was just the right person to handle this kind of thing. Du Guangzhong thought of something, and his expression changed slightly, while Ghost Hand King naturally nodded in agreement. He had done this kind of thing many times in the Blue Dragon Society. Ghost Hand King was already used to it. In fact, if they were strong enough, Ghost Hand King would have killed all of them. In his opinion, they were just a bunch of shameless people. After these martial arts forces left, Chu Xiu's elite subordinates gathered. There were close to 100 martial artists above the innate realm. This number could not be compared to any martial arts force in the Jianghu prefecture. Let's do it. Take a stroll around the Divine Feathers sect, and let some people know that it is necessary to control their mouths. After Chu Xiu gave the order, his subordinates immediately started moving. They secretly concealed their tracks and headed towards the mountain gate where the Divine Feathers sect was located. When Chu Xiu made his move, Cheng Gongtai, the sect master of the Divine Feathers sect, had already returned to the sect. He had never been interested in Chu Xiu's overbearing way of doing things. This time, when he heard Chu Xiu say that he wanted 20% of their profits, he was the first to stand up and refute. Moreover, there was one thing that he did not say about Chu Xiu's conditions. He could see through Chu Xiu's ambition from Chu Xiu. He had sent people to the sects to supervise their accounts and control their financial lifelines. It would be fine if it was only for a short period of time. However, if it was too long, Chu Xiu would really become the emperor of all the sects in the Jianghu prefecture. This was something that Cheng Gongtai absolutely could not tolerate. He did not know if others had seen through Chu Xiu's wild ambition, but he had seen through it. Cheng Gongtai was also prepared to tell the other sects about Chu Xiu's wild ambition and let all the martial arts forces in the Jianghu prefecture unite to resist Chu Xiu. At the same time, they could also cooperate with him. Although Chu Xiu had revealed his wild ambition this time, the idea he proposed was really good. In the past, the martial arts forces in the Jianghu prefecture not only fought on their own, but also had friction with each other. If they really united as Chu Xiu suggested, each monopolizing a business, lowering the purchase price and raising the selling price, the income of the sects would definitely increase beyond their imagination. Without Chu Xiu, their business could still continue. Why did they have to make an emperor of their own? With this thought, Cheng Gongtai revealed a proud smile on his face. He immediately prepared to let his disciples inform the other sects to come to the Divine Feathers sect for a discussion. However, at this moment, a disciple hurriedly pushed the door open and said in panic, "Master! Bad news! The people from the Jianghu prefecture's Inspector Hall have surrounded our mountain gate." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.